Good here. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started with our budget work session. So we will start with item 230406, Animal Protection Society. And let's see and if you will introduce your team here and see, we will get started.
Good afternoon, Dwayne Brinson, Assistant County Manager, Community Safety. First presentation on the agenda today is from the Animal Protection Society. Have a PowerPoint. We also have representatives from the Sheriff's Office here as well. Ms. Shafonda Allen is here, and she can introduce herself and her team. I'll turn it over to her at this time.
Thank you so much for letting us come today and speak with you. I really appreciate all of you and look up to you. I'm Shafonda Allen, the Executive Director of the Animal Protection Society of Durham. This is Leah Santelli, our Director of Life-Saving Programs. And this is Carolyn Wiley, our Director of Development. I brought them here in case you have any questions about our life-saving efforts or our fundraising efforts. This is who I count on to raise us over $1 million a year. Thank you. So, you ready? Okay. All right. So the Animal Protection Society of Durham.
Would you pull the mic up as close as you can?
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you.
Thank you. So this presentation is about our budget and what we bring to Durham County and why we're asking for additional funds. So the Animal Protection Society of Durham and our life-saving partnership. We are a people-centered organization that cares for animals. We provide services to help keep pets in their homes. We provide temporary housing to pets that have no place to go. And we provide the best care possible based on our resources. Who are we and who do we serve? The Animal Protection Society of Durham is a 503c nonprofit organization. We've been serving Durham since 1970, and we've managed the Durham County Animal Shelter since 1990. We are not a national organization. We work locally, we volunteer locally, and we commit all of our resources to improving the lives and people in Durham. We made that change in 2012 when the Sheriff's Department took over animal services that we now only serve Durham County and Durham County citizens. APS programs, animal shelter operations, after-hours emergency pet care for displaced pets. I actually just got an email from our bookkeeper that this fiscal year alone, we spent over $75,000 at Triangle Pets Emergency for the stray and injured animals that get hurt after hours and on weekends. Cruelty holes with medical support and investigation. Since Animal Protection Society of Durham is the only shelter in Durham, and we have a partnership with the Sheriff's Department. Any animals that are seized for cruelty receive their medical support from APS, and they also receive their medical investigations from APS. Medical quarantines and evaluations, an adoption program, redemption program, behavior assistance, and community hotline. We have a free community hotline for people to call and get assistance with their animal behavior issues. Pet food and litter pantry. We provide free pet food and litter to the community. And right now we are partnering with the Salvation Army and Meals on Wheels to help deliver much-needed food to the community. We have a low-cost spay-neuter program. The $20 fixed program in Durham is 100% funded by the APS. We spay or neuter nearly 900 community animals per year with a suggested donation of $20. If they can't afford $20, we'll pay the rest, and we pay everything else, the spay, the neuter, and any medical needs that they have at the time. There's a member of our, the director of our behavior team right there working with a dog who doesn't look like he has any problems at all, but believe me, we get dogs with a lot of problems. And a picture of Gus, one of the dogs that came to us and was with us for several months as he healed from falling from a truck. How much does funding a compassionate, comprehensive animal welfare program cost? What we spend. In Durham, our budget, the current budget that we are in, is $2,841,502.40. This covers the cost for caring for the county's lost, stray, abandoned, neglected, and surrendered animals. It also covers the community service programs to keep pets in homes. APS contributes more than $1.5 million towards the care of animals and people in Durham yearly. What we receive. The Durham County Animal Shelter budget, and this is the budget that we provide for you, which is just the basics, is $1,251,702.07. This is a cost to providing basic care. That's taking them in, feeding them, and basic care. This doesn't cover heartworm disease. It doesn't cover hit by cars. It doesn't cover many of the diseases we see every day, and it doesn't cover any of the community services that our community so desperately needs. Durham County contributes $878,375 to this budget. This is the current budget we're in. The shelter contract only provides primary care. APS provides all other specialized care and treatments. This model is not sustainable. What I mean by that is that about 2 years ago, APS made a commitment to placing as many animals as we possibly could in Durham County. We also made a commitment with COVID and so many people getting evicted that we were going to start programs to help people keep their pets, because we see having a pet is not a privilege, but it is a benefit. It is a health benefit. It is an equity situation, and someone shouldn't be limited to having something in their lives that helps with their blood pressure, helps them feel comfortable and safe based on whether or not they have more money than someone else. Because of those goals, we raise the expectations for ourselves, which unfortunately becomes more expensive. Sorry, me and this clicker are not getting along right now. This is from our audited financials from fiscal year 22. Our total income was $2,373,430. Of that, $812 came from county funding, $172 came from individual donations and grants. Event income was $337,240. Shelter program income was $241,937. Now, shelter program income is adoption income only. Any animal that comes into the shelter that is redeemed by its owner, that money goes directly to the county and is not counted here. If someone cannot afford to pay their redemption fees, APS or Beyond Fences pays those redemption fees for them. Also, whenever we run adoption specials, like right now we have a pick your price, APS subsidizes all those adoption fees. So if someone pays $20, APS pays the other $105, so that those animals can be adopted instead of not adopted. And we know what, not adopted means in these circumstances. Our animal and veterinary care and programs are $1,769,458. Our administration and management expense is $27,154, and fundraising and events cost $327,928. Thank you for bearing with me there, because numbers are not my thing. People are. But as you can see, It is extremely expensive to do the things that we're doing in Durham County. The fiscal year 23-24 budget request comparison. Fiscal year 23 budget request was $887,375.08. This level contribution to the animal shelter operations leaves an insurmountable fundraising gap. Although we're raising over $1 million a year, we are having to take money that we have for reserves every year in order to help animals and people in Durham the way that we are, and we are going to end this year in a significant deficit. What we're asking for a 23% increase, which would take it to $1,080,333.55. Why are we requesting a 23% increase? Durham County community is growing. We're all aware. Our community is getting larger, needs are getting greater. The needs continue to increase. The need for more help in the shelter is needed, and APS' current level of contribution is unsustainable. As of right now, the people who have joined me today, including myself, are paid 100% by APS. So at least, I think 13 of us are APS-only employees, and only one of those gets any portion of their salary from the county, and that would be our veterinarian, who a small portion goes towards spay-neuter cost. What APS brings to the table: well-trained professional staff, a large committed volunteer pool of over 650 county residents who not only donate their time, they donate their money to making sure that the animals and people of Durham have the services they need, a great reputation and fundraising ability, a loyal, local committed partner who cares. Anytime that we are raising money and applying for a grant, we're applying for it for Durham, for Durham's community. My preference, and I will always say this, is to hire from within Durham. I am from Durham. I went to Hillside. I went to Durham High. I mean, oh my God, no. Lord, I can't claim that. I went to Durham Tech. I have nothing against Durham High for anybody who went there. And we have many young people who come from right around the same community who've come in and been there for many years and learned skills and had the opportunity to build something for themselves. Financial gifts. We bring money and people to the table, solely fund the salaries of several key employees for the sole purpose of serving Durham. I was told that I needed to break these down in priorities. It's really difficult to decide which one is as important, but for us, last year we raised all of our employees to $16.95, all of our base employees to $16.95 an hour. That at the time was cost of living. It is much higher in Durham this year. So we're raising, again, 3%. At the time when we raised the hourly employees, we did not raise our salaried employees, so we did need to do that as well. So number one is cost of living increases. We sincerely believe in people having jobs that allow them to live a decent life. No one should work 40 hours a week and be able to get aid. Customer service manager. This is a position that APS has actually already paid for approximately 4 years. Because of our negative deficit, this is a position that we can no longer carry that only serves the Durham County Animal Shelter. We don't use it in any other capacity other than the shelter. Medical assistant. Honestly, when our veterinarian came back, and it's really hard to find a vet right now, it's really hard to hire a vet right now, she came back with a list of things she would need in order to do her job, and one of those was a medical assistant. So we did bring in a medical assistant at the time. We're covering her this year, but we would like to add her to the shelter budget. Our fourth priority would be increased spay-neuter cost. Drugs cost more. They're harder to get. The more animals we place, the more animals we have to do surgery on. And we also have contracted assistance in that area. And a fifth, there was a fifth when I wrote this, is an animal care technician. We have a lot of animals. At any given moment, we have over 300 animals, and we have maybe 6 animal care techs for the dogs and 3 for the cats. They are extremely overwhelmed. And I would just say, in all reality, many of the people who come into our shelter come from our community. They're part of our family, and they are feeling tremendous amount of stress, not having enough help. Actually, we just lost one of our animal care technicians a week ago, and it was, yes. So, and rabies, pre-exposure vaccines. Anytime you hire new people, you have to protect them from deadly diseases. That is number 6. I know it should probably be way up there, but these will all be number 1 to me, but I'm sure I could get a donation if need be to get our people vaccinated. Attached to the presentation is our shelter budget and shelter budget request letter, our full budget for fiscal year 23 and profit loss report, and that was a profit loss report as of May 11th, which at the time was, I believe, about 209,000 in the negative. I did run one today, and hopefully it'll be better this afternoon because we're working on books, and my bookkeeper tries to scare me by putting in all the debts first. But as of this morning, we were at a negative $465,167,000 budget. Now, we budgeted, we knew it was going to take some money and some reserves to do the things that we expected to do, and we hope to not have to cut services that are so needed in the community, but we know it's not sustainable. So that is the end of my presentation. I did attach a lot of information to this presentation for your review. I'm not certain whether or not you all have had an opportunity to go through everything, but I did make some notes and am prepared to answer some questions if you have them for me and for any member of my team.
Well, thank you for the presentation, first of all. We appreciate you being here, and I will open it up for commissioners and questions. Commissioner Burns.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I do have a lot of questions. I'm not going to ask them all. I might submit them because I want to be fair to my colleagues and fair to your time. I did take time to look over all the material, and I want us to have a good animal shelter. I want the people who work there to have a good experience. I want them to feel good about coming to work. I want them to feel good about their salaries. I guess where my concerns are, this is a budget request. It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but this budget request came after we had already closed out some of the budget requests. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. I submitted my budget in February.
Okay.
When it was due, February 15th. It was on time.
Okay, I'm just asking, sis.
No. I'm just straightforward. I'm not upset at all.
Well, we about to get straightforward.
Yeah.
23% is a lot. That's a lot more than I think a lot of our other folks are asking for. I don't necessarily see in the chart. So I'm gonna run through the questions and I'll tell you the ones that I think are most pressing. So I get that y'all run the animal shelter. I was curious about what other programs y'all ran outside of the animal shelter, but you answered that one already, that is the only one y'all have. Y'all have had this contract solely for about 30 years. I am somewhat concerned about that. I'm gonna be very honest. I'm always curious when we haven't done RFPs. I'm always curious when's the last time somebody did an audit, because you're giving us numbers that I haven't seen. I see that some of these requests are not new, they're current positions, but you don't have a line item for current budget. You have one for requested. I assume that's because you don't think you're gonna be able to fulfill them. You mentioned that you've had to pull money out of reserves. I didn't see the reserve number up there, so I would be curious what your reserves are. I don't even know if we're privy to that, but you all do have them. I had some questions about, you said you had event money, you had fundraising money. You answered a lot of that because the adoptions are one way that you all bring in funding. You all have events. I imagine that that funding is used to buy kitty litter, feed, just a plethora of things to feed the animals, to buy medications for the animals. I guess for me, I go back to the TNVR conversation because we want to be a county that doesn't euthanize, but there was a couple of months last year where y'all were at capacity, didn't euthanize at all. The policy back then was to euthanize after 7 days. And I'm like, I want to give y'all more money. I want to give y'all more support, but we're at capacity. We can't take anybody in. We can't function. I just would, outside of this presentation, I guess I'm asking more globally. I'm not saying no, but I would like to, and audit's a bad word, I would just really like to see a review of everything that kind of sort of goes on. The other question I have, and you answered it, I said per your financial statement, you said y'all had $1,687,000 and $802 in investment funds, and then at the end of fiscal year 21, you had $2,093,359. And so y'all raised the money off of the shelter. And so I'm assuming if you all are raising the money to say that you use this to run the shelter, everything you raise goes right back into the shelter, or does any of that go into reserve? So that's the big question.
Yeah. So I did attach inside the documents our financial audits. We get an in-depth financial audit done every single year. It does have our reserves listed there. Anything, and it's been years, anything that is above what we need to run the shelter. So we have, what you see, there are two budgets. So our profit and loss is our full APS budget. The budget that we submit for vote is the shelter budget. There are many things that are on the full APS budget that are not on that shelter budget. Like you don't see my salary, you don't see Carolyn's salary because we're not on that budget. So as a nonprofit, there is that full budget. Now, if we happen to have someone, say, pass away and leave us $400,000, or as a nonprofit 503B, there are people who leave us money and say, hey, you can't spend this. This needs to be put aside and you can perhaps use interest. Yeah, so like every donation that you get, and especially grants, if you get grant money, that money has to be used for a specific purpose. There are certain positions, even like we have right now, a community outreach person that's handling rescues. They were paid for by Best Friends grant. Once that grant money is over, then they need to be picked up in our budget, or they need to be let go. So there are certain things that we have money for at one point, and then we don't have money. As of right now, I would say the last 3 years we've operated at a negative. Absolutely nothing that comes from Durham County is ever put in reserves. What comes from Durham County actually isn't able to run the shelter at the level it is. So it is all kept, like they're very, like I have audits for years. We get a very in-depth audit every single year. We have to. We have to as part of this contract. We have to in order to have grants. So everything that we receive from our operation funds and adoptions, they go strictly to running the shelter. Whenever there is a need, an extra need for anything at all, it comes out of APS's accounts. I have heartworm positive dogs, APS's accounts. I have hit by cars, APS's accounts. Any of those. We receive, I believe, a little over $9,000 a year for emergency after hours care. This year we spent $75,000. That difference would come from APS's side. So in order, the way, and we're not a secret to our money is up there, it's on the financials, it's on our audits. We are very transparent. We're on GuideStar. I mean, you can look us up. But, so I lost my train of thought. There is no extra, and it wouldn't be taken from the county if there was. Every single thing that comes from the county is used for the county purposes. And when we do a fundraiser, it is not for extra. Like say we We recently had the Walk for the Animals, and we raised $125,000. That money goes to what we're currently doing. Whenever we write a budget as a nonprofit organization, the expectation is our income is going to be what we fundraise. So we start the year with saying, okay, Carolyn, I need you to raise $2 million this year. So every event we have, every fundraiser we have, everything we have is going towards that income. Just like we're hustling for the money. That's how we're getting it.
I mean, it seems so, and you've answered some of it, and that does provide some context. It's just, other people have been up here longer, they've seen these numbers before. I'm familiar with the work.
And you mentioned something I have a question about. You said euthanize for 70 days?
No, 7. I didn't say 70. My question was, weren't you all at capacity last year?
We,
Thinking it back to the TNVR conversation.
yeah, we've been in capacity for a long time with cats. We are
Right.
not in capacity right now.
No.
And the way that the shelter actually operates, so that if you all aren't aware, we don't pull by time, and we don't, at this point, pull by space. We pull by health and by temperament.
Right.
So based on how well they're doing, if they're not doing well medically and we aren't able to help them, and behaviorally they're not safe for the community and cannot be placed.
They're aggressive.
Yeah, and so it's a legal holding period, but there is no, if you get any emails from anybody in the county or whatever saying, oh my God, they kill animals in this,
I don't.
it's definitely not the case. It depends on how the animal is doing, but we don't euthanize for space. That is correct.
I yield my time to my colleagues. I have some more questions later.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's really helpful to, get the information directly, and you did provide us a lot of information. I really appreciate what you and all of your staff do.
Thank you.
The APS has been our partner for 33 years, and just even looking at the budget, it's pretty astounding that the county only provides about $841,000, and that it's only about 34% of the budget or the different programs and services that you provide that you are actually raising, 3/4 of the budget out in the community. And be interesting to know what the value is as well of the 650 volunteers. I don't know if you've ever done a economic impact or value of that labor.
It is a significant value. I didn't pull it up for this meeting, but it is a significant value.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to know that number as well, because and Dwayne, I would also love to get benchmarking data about the top 5 counties that we do compare ourselves to, as well as our neighbors, Orange and Chatham, especially Orange, I guess, of course Wake, but how much they spend on the counties directly provide for animal shelter care, animal services. I know it's probably going to be hard to do apples to oranges, but just to, the fact is, if we're benefiting, the county is benefiting from basically all the volunteer labor and also the fundraising that you do in the community. So I'm very grateful for that. I would be really curious to know more about your what salaries people are getting. This is a big priority for our board. We're going to be getting our staff up to 1940, I think, 1920. So I mean, the fact that you're asking for, $59,000 to do a 3% increase, I mean, that's very modest. I remember at one point a few years ago, you had staff that weren't even making $15 an hour.
We had some staff that were making probably $11 an hour. I mean, we were definitely at one point we were not paying a living wage. I think we started maybe in 2015, 16, aiming towards a living wage, and right now we are, since the interest is going up, I don't know, interest or whatever, cost of living is going up so much in Durham. that now we thought we had made it at $16.95, but now we're no longer, our employees are not making cost of living.
So is that the lowest wage you have right now? Is
Our
$16.95?
starting wage for our hourly employees, all of them, is $16.95 an hour.
Yeah, that's you can't get people to work for that. I mean,
No, we try to, get them to
Yeah.
stay because we're nice and.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it would be great to get some more information about that. And then I think there's been some type of disconnect, or I'm trying to understand. I saw that you had submitted this budget on February 13th. So who was that submitted to?
I always submit my budget to the Sheriff's Department, and yeah, I turned it into the Sheriff's Department and their
Okay,
budget office.
February.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess going forward, we need to work on the communication, because I know our staff didn't get it, or at least what we were told was that it was submitted, a few weeks ago or something like that. But my point is that we need
And I'll
to,
definitely check that. Yeah, February. It was. I
Yeah.
can send you the original email if you like.
okay. So we definitely need to work on just how things are getting communicated and shared. Yes. Oh, hey.
Hi, Commissioner Jacobs. Yes, we did get the APS budget proposal in mid-February. That is the date that is in the APS contract since 2002, that they submit by mid-February. But of course, that comes after the budget timeline for the county or departments to submit information. But we did make the budget office aware of the 23% increase amount in early March. And then we met with APS several times in March and April trying to get understanding, because the 23% was very much higher than previous years. And just as in previous years, just go through the contract process, but maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, the budget proposal was a 3.9% increase, cost of living increase. There's been health insurance increases and insurance and things like that. So, but 23% is much, much higher than the typical 5% that's given or allocated for contract increases each year. So we did make the county budget office aware, but just timeline contractually, it does not mesh well with the county timelines for budget proposals.
Right. So, okay. Well, it sounds like we need to work on what's a different timeline that's going to work for everyone. So it sounds like there were some conversations that
Now,
we had to have about that.
a question for us, and I don't know if I'm able to ask this. Normally, we know, more information about our contract and budget by this time, because we also start a budget in July 1st, which we can't do now. Since this process has been moved out so far, is there any idea when APS would know about their contract or their budget?
Manager, would you answer her?
And I will say that we did not include the 23% in the manager's recommended budget because we didn't have any details about this proposal. So that was not included. And our budget team can confirm, I think there's a 5% increase or a slight increase. But I know it was not the 23% because that was not a conversation we had.
I'll confirm, commissioners and APS. The current budget is loaded flat, what we call flat, meaning the same as last year without any increase, because that's what we received at the time of the budget request. All other parts of this were said to still being reviewed until this came up again a couple weeks ago. But some of this is process stuff that obviously our office will work diligently with the sheriff's office to make sure we streamline in future years. So we appreciate the opportunity here.
And I will say that we typically would not expect for the budget team to have the conversation because it is a division of the sheriff's office. And so it is a process that we allow the sheriff's team and APS to talk through. And then the sheriff's office would provide a recommendation to the budget staff.
Okay. Well, I would be concerned about a flat budget. I mean, we can just look at our own budget, and, the average increase is about 10%. We know that we know all the issues that everybody's facing related to the cost of everything has gone up, whether it's medications or for us, materials, staff, benefits. We're doing that ourselves, so I would not expect a flat salary. We know all the challenges, so I think we need to be fair and we need to be reasonable. We may not be able to do 23%, but we need to do at least try to address what we're seeing in all parts of our community. So I hope that we'll look at, if we can't do the 23, I know 10% is the average increase when I looked at county departments. Some we've got higher than that, some lower than that, but that was the average. So I look, we can talk about it further, but I do hope that we can try to at least meet some of the needs. And I appreciate I get lots of emails about concerns about things. I never get a concern about the services provided by APS. Never.
Thank you.
That's
and
not
thank you
something I get any emails about. So I'm grateful to you all. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to hear. And I don't know if anyone else has any other questions.
Yes, there are some other questions.
Yes.
So we'll start on this side, Commissioner Lum.
Hi, thank you all so much for coming and all of your work and service at APS. My cat is actually from the shelter, Tox. He used to be named Franklin at the shelter, but now we've named him Tox. I am in agreement with, increasing, especially when it comes to like the salaries, making sure that we're paying everyone a living wage is a really big priority. And so I'm supportive of us trying to find a way, especially focusing on that, to include that within our budget. I did have one clarifying question in the attached budget proposal. So I see the request is $1,080,333. Last year was $878,375. And that added up to be a $201,958 difference, right? But then the PowerPoint in the budget increase priorities, I added those up, and that equaled $220,905. I don't know if I did math wrong or.
No, you probably did not. I started. You probably did not. We don't have a finance director at the shelter, so welcome to finance director. What was the difference?
So on the slideshow, the proposed budget additions totaled to $220,905, but in the budget proposal, the difference in the increase was $201,958. So I didn't know which of the two.
Oh, yes, I see it here. Okay, so I am, okay. So the increase we are asking for is $201,958,000. That's a 23% increase. But when I had to do priorities, I put it ended up costing more. We don't want, if that adds up to more than $201,958,047, I'm not asking for that extra $19,000.
Yeah.
It's just how that ended up. I must have went down in some other areas of the budget that are actually more, I'll probably save money in some other parts of the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful, if you could update that slide then and just share that out so we can just see if that needed those adjustments there or if it was in another part of the budget.
I think it's definitely, what I'll do is I will point to, because I printed out, on the budget, the proposed budget, there are probably some areas in here that are actually going to be lower next year than they were before. So I will sort of highlight those and send them, I guess, directly to the commissioners or the budget office.
That would be great. Yeah, and I think to Commissioner Jacobs' point, also the volunteer hours, if you could also send us,
yes,
if you have that available, that monetary value, I guess. And then also the cost of living increase, so it's $16.95 right now. What will this increase that you're requesting bring that minimum salary to?
That will be 3% increase on 1695. And since we haven't been able, like, we wait to work on our full budget when we get some kind of approval on this budget, so it will be whatever 3% of 1695 is. Does anybody have a calculator?
Did you say 1995?
No, it's, they start at 1695, and it's 3% increase, so it'll be like almost a 51-cent increase.
So I'm having a hard time hearing you,
Oh,
talking in the
I'm
mic.
sorry.
Yeah.
They make $16. Our starting pay right now is $16.95. We put in a 3% increase, and so that will take them up almost
1745.
$17.45 will be the new starting pay.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns.
Well, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Just one, was that covered in the original budget?
And
Proposal that you sent in?
yes, there's no, this is the original, what we're discussing is the original one that I sent in February. I didn't change it any from February 15th.
I guess I'm having a hard time with the discrepancy between the 5% and the 20% that you're asking now, but I'll get to that. Let me just go ahead and let Commissioner Carter weigh in.
And she mentioned 5%. So to clarify, the recommended budget does not include 5%. I thought there had been a recommendation for a 5% increase, but there was not. And so there has not been a,
There was no recommendation?
there was no recommendation to increase the APS budget at all. Mm-hmm. Right.
Which I don't know any organization that's able to operate on flat funding. I mean, so I'm on the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, as you all know. I've mentioned it a bunch of times here lately. And the reports I hear from APS every month really indicate to me that the staff is incredibly professional, incredibly compassionate, incredibly community-oriented and driven. They care about animals, of course, so much more than that. You know, really adept at fundraising. The couple fundraisers I've been to, it's been amazing, the amount of money that pour in. You know, the volunteer hours are just unheard of. You know, we don't even need a monetary value necessarily to know that 650 volunteers and however many hours that would add up to is just absolutely incredible. You know, if we had to pay those people. And, you know, the bottom line is you are a partner who cares, and I have really grown to appreciate that so much. I've also felt like there's an excellent working relationship between Animal Services, Office of the Sheriff, and the shelter. That's seemed to be very evident in our meetings, so that's great. You know, I don't know what you would cut from this list of priorities. We want you to do the cost of living increases, and those positions you mentioned, I don't know how you'd function without them. And then the others are increased costs for spaying and neutering. We want to keep doing that for sure. And of course, you have to give rabies pre-exposure vaccination. So I don't know what we cut. I mean, I'm tempted to say we maybe need to increase it because you're not making it up to $19.22 an hour for all of your. So, you know, like, be careful what comes forward when it comes to salaries. So, you know, I feel like you all are wizards, but I don't know how you know, at stretching $1, but I don't know how you'd stretch any further than what you're already doing. So to me, the request seems in line, and it seems reasonable, despite the fact that it's a 23% increase. You know, I'm not sure the last time you had an increase. So
Not to this amount. I think for us, you know, honestly, depending on what you all are able to do will be what we're able to do in providing services to the community. Because, of course, taking care of the animals in the shelter is what we're contracted to do. But if we have to cut anything, it's going to be cutting things to people who have the least amount of resources. It'll be cutting those things as in food pantry, redemption assistance, spay-neuter assistance. As far as our staff, I just definitely want to say is that, yes, we are contract, and there hasn't been RFP out in 30 years, but there aren't a lot of people that do what we do. I'm fine with that. I'm a Durham resident. I pay taxes. But we are providing a county service. We're not just a contractor. We also work really hard to contribute to Durham County, to educate people in Durham County. We are privileged and honored to have the relationship we do with Durham. We are in Durham. We are part of Durham. And I would say that our people who make the least do have some of the hardest jobs. They are the people who take care of the animals. They are the people that, unfortunately, when the animals cannot be kept, have to perform those duties, have to be certified to perform those duties. So, we're asking people to do very difficult jobs at $16.95 an hour. So, like I said, I definitely appreciate you all. I know 23% is really high. Our board really thought about it when they asked me to make the request, because believe me, I never wanted to be in this seat. But they felt like it was needed with what's going on in Durham County at the moment.
Anything else?
Offline, I would like to ask about what happens when you have a sole source, provider of services. Word gets out for RFP, and there's a sole source. If this is the sole source of these services, it seems like they could request even more, right? Because whether it's a turn. Anyway, it just feels like a conundrum and a key position to be in. But I'm in favor. I'm in favor of finding this money. If we need to add it to the delete list, that would be what I would suggest.
So, just have a couple of questions. I mean, the 20%, I'm not there yet. The 10% that Commissioner Jacobs mentioned sounds reasonable. I still think we don't have enough information, enough data from you to warrant the 20%. And I'd like to hear more from staff to find out what warrants the 20%, because that's a huge increase from what it was that you're asking for. The other question is around hours. How many hours that are being, have your hours shifted from COVID till now? There's just a few questions that I would like to get answers for before we move on this. And I know we're not making the decisions today, so I'd like for staff to work on getting us the information before we make any decisions about whether it's 10% or 20%.
Okay. So would you
That
like?
works, yeah.
And what I would say is we would really like, and I see Attorney Lovelace getting up, because the sheriff's office staff, I know, has been working with them in reviewing this request to get to what you were asking about. And so if you have an update on how that process has gone and what the status.
Manager Soul, if you can get us the questions, compile that list to us, I know the goal is to have our budget in place, the county budget in place, I think next week possibly, but we can probably get that to you in 24 to 48 hours. Captain Manning, who's here from Animal Services, we've been working with APS looking at this proposal for months now, so we already have the historical data, and we have the budget proposals from previous years, and so we can get you additional information. The budget has increased every year since 2012. I think David Labar calculated it since 2012. It's been about a 97% increase. When we first took over oversight, the budget was about $570,000. So we can get you more information, and we can get that to you relatively quickly. So if you get those questions to us later today, once you finish with the budget work session, we'll try to have it to you close of business tomorrow, so we don't delay the budget process.
That'd be great, yeah. That works. Yeah, all right. Any other questions, concerns?
If we, just wondering, like, if we get the responses end of day tomorrow, when will our board we won't have another time to discuss before the budget, so then how will our,
Yeah, our,
We've got another, we don't have another meeting?
And no, we had a date reserved for tomorrow, but we decided we weren't going to use that date.
Right.
But what I can do is just reach out to you all individually to find out where you are and how you would like.
I think we're going to need to discuss this later when we talk about the add delete list.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to
because we've
talk
got some
about it.
time for the add delete lift. Supposed to have 45 minutes on that one this afternoon, so.
Just one additional thing. Typically, and traditionally, the APS contract comes before the board for approval each year. Some years it's June. I think last year it might have been August. So if you want to set an amount and then look at doing an increase early next year, because the contract approval will not come before you until probably August at this point. So if additional time is needed, that is an option, because the contract will still have to come before you due to the amount of money that's involved.
So what I would say, in past years when the contract was approved late, it may be 2 or 3 months before Durham, before the shelter gets a service fee, which APS does have to cover those months. Would this mean if our contract did not get voted on, we would still receive a service fee for at least where we currently are? Because that does become a hardship for the organization to fund all the shelter without any support while that contract is getting voted on.
Okay, so Keith, I see you over there.
I hear you all trying to assess time. Let me give you 3 options.
Okay,
Number 1 option is you can decide today on the add delete list, up to $201,000 more, some difference. Second option is you can make a decision amongst yourselves and then just have it, let us know, and we'll put it in the budget for the approval on the 12th, this one item. So it wouldn't be an add delete, but it gives us an extra week to get some questions answered and some sort of coherent number to be a part of the budget ordinance you approve on the 12th. Third thing is exactly what was just discussed. You can wait till the contract comes up, and assuming you're in agreement, at that point, budget in a certain amount, and if it's additional funding needed, we would do a budget amendment to then increase it however much up to $201,000 request, trying not to disprove the contract so you wouldn't have any slowdown in money. So you have 3 options: today, the 12th, or sometime when you approve the contract in the next month or 2.
got you. Thanks for that information, Keith. Okay, does that work for the board?
And I,
Okay. Okay, so is there anything else with this conversation? If not, we'll move on.
I think, and we can touch base offline about this, Manager Swell, when we send the questions to the Sheriff's Department, I think if we can, if the conversation around the budget timelines can also be added, of what dates the APS has to submit their budget versus what dates we require the Sheriff's Department to submit budget to us. So that way we can try to get those lined up.
I know this meeting is about to end, but I do want to answer one question that you asked Commissioner Howerton. You said, did our hours change due to COVID? Our hours have not changed. The Sheriff's Department is asking that we're open
You'll
more.
need to speak in the mic, please.
Commissioner Howerton, I'm sorry. You asked if our hours have changed due to COVID, and I just wanted to say our hours have not changed, but the Sheriff's Department is asking us to be open more hours and more days, potentially. That is their current request. That is what we're discussing.
Because I thought that I'd heard that, but I hadn't heard a response about it, that you're being asked to open more hours rather than less hours?
We're being asked to be open more hours. That is correct.
Okay, so was that,
For the same amount of money, correct.
does that means more staff?
If you all weren't forwarded the information, I can forward it to you.
Yeah, that would be one question. If you're going to stay open more hours, what does it mean for staff, and what would be the cost of hiring more staff to be open more hours?
So one of the questions that came up during the TNVR discussion was reducing the hold time from 5 days to 72 hours. And we've had some ongoing discussions about what that means. But Durham is in the middle of the triangle, and we know how traffic is. And so one of the things, just speaking generally, is like, well, if you come home and your dog is not home, the shelter is closed at 5, and they don't open until after work hours begin for someone, So having that extra time for someone to be able to get to the shelter and see if their dog is there or their cat or whatever it is. So we were looking at those issues, and Shafanda has looked at other counties and things like that. And one of the things we did say, and it's an ongoing discussion, and they've been meeting with Captain Manning, but I did ask through Captain Manning, and in that discussion, that if it's going to cost more money to be open those hours, get us a proposal on what that looks like. So no, we're not asking them to do it for the same amount of money, but we are asking for some evening hours or some flexibility there so our residents to be able to redeem their animals and that sort of thing, or to get information or to surrender an animal. We have some hours that folks who don't get home to 6 or 7 o'clock, they go to work at 8 in the morning, they're able to get to the shelter during the week and not necessarily on the weekends. So but it's an ongoing discussion, and I think APS also had some issues they wanted to address, and so what we agreed to do was this fall, it's an ongoing discussion, and we're looking at those shelter operations, and if we're required to do an RFP, that may be something that we include in there so we can have a better understanding of what it would cost to run a shelter in the county for our residents that meets expectations, quality of life for animals, and that sort of thing. So it's an ongoing discussion.
All right, thank you. Anything else?
Well, I mean, certainly if we're going to expand, and that makes total sense, if we're going to expand the services, it's going to cost more money. And that's why I was asking for the benchmarking data. I know that could take some time, but and understanding what are other counties provide in terms of the hours, but also the funding goes hand in hand. But, I want to be very clear personally that, I really hope that people can work together on this. I think it's very important because we're talking about, again, I think it's very clear the benefits that we get from partnering with the APS. And we have certain partners in our community, like Urban Ministries, who runs our shelter, Durham Center for Senior Life, who runs our senior center. We have some very strong, long-standing partnerships. They're not the same as service contracts that we do. It's a very different relationship. And in all of those three, we benefit from a lot of community support and a lot of, frankly, free benefits from volunteer labor and also donations that, frankly, the county is not having to pay for. So
I think you hear from this board that we are very supportive. We are just asking to get some questions answered and to know which direction we need to go. So thank you so much for your presentation, and we're going to have more conversation in a little while.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, the next conversation is the stipends for appointees to boards and commissions. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Howerton, Vice Chair Jacobs, Commissioners, Madam Manager, Attorney Andrews. We are going to discuss the Boards and Commission stipends. And I will like to start by thanking the clerk, Monica Wallace, and her team for providing a lot of the information that you'll see in this presentation and doing quite a bit of the legwork and researching what our peers are doing. I'll start off with an overview to let you know there are 41 boards to which Durham County makes appointments. Wow. There are additional boards that you all are appointed to, but you make appointments to approximately 41 boards. And there are about 200 residents that you make appointments to on these boards. In reviewing all of the bylaws for these boards, 7 of them do not permit compensation for members, and we have those listed here. If we remove that number of residents appointed to those boards, you are only appointing 160 residents who may be considered in the compensation and stipend program. We also do hold every year a volunteer annual appreciation program where our volunteers are honored, acknowledged, and given gifts. This is our current stipend program for some of our boards and commissions. You'll see Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee. They receive mileage reimbursement for their visits. They don't receive a monthly or a regular stipend. The ABC Board receives regular stipends. You just approved an increase in those stipends, but those payments are made from the ABC Board. That does not come out of this pool that we'll be discussing. Similarly, the Board of Elections, there are stipends that were recently approved for them, increases, and that is paid by their department. That does not come out of the allotment that we're discussing today. We do pay jury commission, and then we, again, mileage reimbursement for Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, and Women's Commission, collectively, they receive $500 a year for events and activities. Not to be confused with jury commission, they receive $600 a year to be divided among their members, whereas Women's Commission, theirs is not for the members, it is for the activities of that board. Here's some details we found about some of our peer counties and stipends that they provide. None of those counties offer across-the-board stipends, so there aren't any who say every committee receives this amount. We don't have that in any of our peers. What we do have, similarly to us, is that the ABC boards and BOE boards receive larger stipends based on their bylaws. On average, we see that Mecklenburg averages about $75 per month for the boards that they do give stipends to, and Wake County averages about $25 per meeting for the ones that they do give stipends to. So this conversation started in part, as far as I'm aware, with the conversation around the Durham City and their stipend program that they enacted. And so there's a hyperlink here in this presentation to their stipend program, and it details their stipend program there in that first bullet. Stipends are intended to offset related expenses to babysitting, parking, transportation, and meals, and participants in the city program must opt in. So you must say, yes, I want to opt in, I want to receive the stipends. Stipends are $50 per meeting, and they're offered to all city appointees who opt into the program. They receive disbursement every 6 months. They have approximately 40 participants in their program, and they have 28 boards, with 23 offering a stipend because, like us, they have some boards that, per their bylaws, are not eligible for compensation. The estimated yearly stipend amount is placed in the clerk's budget and is dispersed by the clerk. They plan $50,000 annually for their program. They also host the annual volunteer appreciation program with gifts for their volunteers. So our recommendation is that we also create a stipend program. I think based on some of the conversations that you all have had, there's been some disparity between our appointees and the city appointees, and so we like to look at also holding a stipend program. We are also recommending the $50 stipends to eligible county appointees who opt into the stipend program. We are noting that county employees are not eligible for the stipend program. Many of the county employees who are appointed to those boards and commissions, it's a part of their work. We're also recommending that a difference to the city program is that we offer a $25 stipend program for virtual meetings. The city's is for meetings. They don't designate between virtual or in person. We like to make that actually offer that program to virtual meetings because we understand this could offset the cost of internet, and if we are looking to expand our membership and really reach out to those who may be in disadvantaged communities that may not have access to internet, this might help offset that. We recommend an additional $100,000 annually to the clerk's budget to cover this program. Looking at, we have twice as many participants and twice as many boards and commissions as the city. We are estimating that we might need about twice as much to cover annually. We'd also like to look at dispersing our stipends quarterly from the clerk's office instead of every 6 months the way the city does. If you are looking to offset some of the childcare expenses and travel expenses, every 6 months may not be as effective as doing something quarterly. I have had discussions with the clerk and her team, and they do think that that is doable. We also discussed monthly, but we think that might impose another hardship on their team in having to do those monthly payments, but quarterly is manageable. And we will continue to host the annual volunteer appreciation program for all appointees, which would include that annual gift. And that is our recommendation.
Next steps?
Oh, our next steps would be that, I believe this is currently on the add delete list, if I'm correct. It's currently on the add delete list, so it would be something that you consider as part of that list.
Okay, all right. So, okay, Commissioner Lum?
Thank you, Shannon. I'd just like to say I am seeing a trend with your presentations of, you provide us with an overview of what it is now and what's being posed. So I really, really appreciate that.
I have been listening to the questions that you have after presentation, so I like to give the context up front so I can kind of offset as many of those questions that may be coming.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're reading our minds. I am in full support of this. I'm really glad that we're looking into doing this because I think it's also been like an equity issue of like some of our joint boards even. There's some joint boards where the city appointees are receiving stipends and our county members aren't.
Right.
So I'm glad that we're finally addressing this. Do we know, so the city, if they do the $50 stipends, is theirs just across the board, in person or virtual?
We believe theirs is across the board, in person or virtual. They don't make a distinction between the two.
Then can we just get clarification from the city then, like how many of our joint boards are still meeting virtually versus in person? Because then if there's some joint boards where we're giving 25 and then the city's giving 50.
That's a great, we'll do that. We'll get that information from the city.
And then, yeah, actually, no, that's it.
So, just one thing, there is one board that the city, it's a board or committee, it's a budget participatory budgeting. I understand they get like $250 a month.
Is that a joint that we have county appointees? That's not one of our, that doesn't sound like one of our boards.
Just that one, that program. So they get a whole lot more.
But I would tell you, that's a lot of work, the participatory budgeting, they have to
Right.
do a lot of proposals.
They have to go out to the community and do a lot of work, so.
Madam Chair, like the ABC board and like the BOE board, that they wouldn't receive the $50 because they already, in their bylaws, they receive something different. That is probably one of their boards that receives something different.
Yeah, because some of the boards do.
Right.
Got it. Go ahead, Commissioner Carter.
Yeah, just thank you so much. Great information and a wonderful presentation, straight to the point. I brought this forward because one of the committees I'm assigned to has this issue of the discrepancy between what the county appointees were receiving, and it came up, right? And it was becoming an issue. And so, I definitely am in favor of it. And I would even go so far as to say the boards that are joint, I just think our stipend should be the same.
Okay.
Across, that's my opinion. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but just to be consistent, that was what I was hoping for, was consistency. So anyway, otherwise, thank you for this recommendation. I think it's really good.
Thank you. I will also note that some of our boards that their bylaws do not allow for the stipend, some of those are the same joint boards that for the city do not allow a stipend. So there is some consistency in there. We wouldn't be paying one where they don't because it's in their bylaws. I imagine that once we've also adopted a program, should you move in this direction, that there may be some boards that will look at revising some of their bylaws.
Okay, I think it's great. I so appreciate you doing this. We've talked about it for a while, so it's great to see the numbers. And the other question I have is about the virtual meetings, the $25 stipend for the virtual meetings. Is that, are there any restrictions on that? And what I mean by that does that mean somebody just sign on and sign off?
So the way we account, the way we do accounting of attendance, it comes from the person who clerks to that committee. They send their meeting statements to the clerk's office, and so we wouldn't monitor when you engaged, when you disengaged. We would go by the attendance roster that was forwarded to the clerk's team. So there may be there may be some of that, but we wouldn't manage that. We would, if you were noted as being an attendee, because you could also have an issue that could have prevented you. Maybe you lost Wi-Fi, and if the whole meeting was virtual, so we wouldn't manage that.
So I guess it's going to be a lot of work on the clerks in monitoring this whole system, and it's a good thing that that our clerk is getting another person that can help out. So that's going to be great, because I think this is going to be a lot of work.
Forgot to say thanks to our clerks for doing the legwork and the research. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything else?
That is all.
You have a question? Yes.
So Shannon, on my notes here, my questions are benchmarking, policy, city, rationale, and to Commissioner Alam's point, you answered all of those in your presentation, so thank you. I really appreciate.
Good.
Yeah. Could you discuss a little bit about what is, because I like the fact that there is a rationale and kind of like people being eligible, in terms of some accountability, but what is when people apply for it, what will be kind of what's considered like makes you eligible to be reimbursed or get a stipend?
That's a great question. I'll go back to. I'll go back to the City of Durham, their current program. There isn't a rule for eligibility, but once you're appointed, you can opt in. So you would decide as the appointee if I need the stipend to offset transportation, or if I needed to offset a babysitter or internet. You would make that decision. The appointee would make that decision. Again, that's not something that we'd govern or that we'd manage. We'd allow the appointee to make that decision. And so there isn't we don't recommend an eligibility requirement. Right now, they have about 50% of their appointees opt into the program, and so we suspect that we'd be somewhere along those lines as well.
Okay. Do they actually explain, like, this stipend program is to compensate you for, and then listing those things?
They do. In their appointment letter, they give an explanation of the stipend program and then give you details on how you can opt into their program. So they put that in their appointment letter, which is something that we would look at adding to our appointment letters as well.
Okay.
Should this be approved?
All right. I think that's great to provide that context, and then let people self-govern.
Right.
Govern, and we'll see how many people, what the need is, because it sounds like there are only 40 participants in the city program. There are probably a lot of people who aren't applying, who've just, decided they don't need it.
Right.
Whereas other people do. So I like that, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. No other questions? Nothing else for you? Thank you so much for your work. All right, our next conversation is the CIP General Discussion. And now my paper says CIP. You're right. I skipped ahead. That's what my paper says. She was trying to dish y'all. She was trying to dish y'all.
And Keith, I will say I did speak with Perry a little earlier. I know we're doing a kind of a generic overview of it, but I did want him to elaborate a little bit on the animal services building that's in the CIP, so that this board would understand what that entails.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We're going to have a very high overview of the CIP, largely because we're going to do a biennial I guess, every 2-year update this summer and fall, hopefully coming back in winter, either late 2023 or very early 24 with a manager's recommended CIP that will hopefully answer a lot of questions comprehensively. There may be, as Dr. Sowell noted, some specific questions today, and we have experts on either side of me to help answer those questions. And with that, I'll get started with the review. The discussion topics largely are going to be around the CIP process. Debt affordability is always a major issue. Any individual capital project discussion and questions you all might have, and then a rough draft timeline of what happens next. Why a capital improvement plan? We normally look out 10 years. Some capital improvement plans are 5 years. Ours is 10 years. We have enough capital projects and enough high dollar items that we need to look out that far. We do a CIP because we understand there's potential pressure of capital projects that relate to the annual budget. A perfect example might be a new animal shelter. If it's bigger, you better believe APS or whoever runs that is going to come back and ask for more annual operating dollars to run a bigger animal shelter. So that's how it always can affect annual budgets. There's timing of complicated projects that we have to take into account, especially as we look out 10 years. One of the main and most important things is our ability to support capital needs in a financially prudent manner. Not only does that mean how do we annually pay for debt service related to capital projects, but how do we keep our bond rating at AAA? So those sorts of things are extremely important and are fleshed out and thought through as part of the CIP process. CIP responds to unexpected issues and needs, and actually we have a slide dedicated to that because normally we do this every 2 years, but the world doesn't stop and wait for us during those 2 years, so there are capital projects that weren't part of the CIP that become part of the discussion, and we have to talk about some of those. We have to weigh the cost to citizens versus value to citizens, and then ultimately we have to figure out how to pay for this over time. Steps involved with capital planning. Usually we start with a facility needs assessment. The last one we had was 2022. Okay, so we have an updated facility assessment that sort of gives the backbone to CIP requests that come from departments. What Perry gets is not everything. That's not internal to departments like our IS&T department has heavy-duty requests. Perry's facility needs assessment is exactly what it says, county facility needs, which is different. All I'm saying is we have more things than just that as part of the CIP. Then we go through the process of prioritizing and sequencing projects, payments, and when they need to come online over 10 years. Then after we do that prioritization and sequencing, then we figure out what the cash flow is to pay for projects, 10, 15, 20, 30 projects over 10 years. Ultimately, after we get the cash flow projections, we then evaluate the affordability. What does affordability mean? How much are you willing to raise the property tax rate to pay for annual debt service? You can buy everything at once and raise the tax rate 10 cents and have potential blowback from that, or we can spread projects out and pay for it over time like most people do to try to balance out cost versus affordability. And then we update the capital improvement plan every 2 years. Next steps, August through December, we're going to review the facility master plan to determine if further vetting of existing and new projects are required. We'll reevaluate project placement in the CIP. There are some projects we have in the CIP that we've thought were going to start that haven't started yet that need to be reprioritized and reevaluated. Perfect example is the DSS building beside us. There's some other things taking a little longer with some of our CIP projects like our HANA system. You've heard about replacing the ERP system. That was planned to start a little bit earlier. We're still on the time frame, but just a little bit later. Anyway, we have to move all of those things around and then see how it trickles out in terms of cost and when. Durham County and DPS update cash flow projections based on shovel readiness. This is a huge deal. DPS projects are by far the biggest part of our CIP, and those projects are constantly in flux, no different than ours in terms of pricing. School project costs are changing daily. In fact, schools like DSA have gone up massively in cost. We're looking at, on average, between the two high schools being requested by DPS at $200 million each, which is astounding. We're getting near $250 million for a single high school. Those are massive numbers. Point being, they're increasing, as are all their other school requests, elementary schools, middle schools. we always, after we get all this information and we mix it out and we sequence it, we time it, and we run our cash flow, then we sit down with Doug Carter and Associates or whoever our financial advisor will be at that time and review that cash flow to make sure we meet our financial standards and AAA. Claudia, I saw you grab the microphone. Did you? Internal and external review process.
Wait a minute, Keith, stop for a minute. Go ahead. She was about to say something.
Sit over there.
Yeah, we're going through that right now. We have 3 different financings that we're doing. I'm sorry. Right now, we're going through that. So in between ARPA, my other high priority project is our preparation for some upcoming financing. And to Keith's point, it's tricky because projects can get costly. And so we have to plan what does it look like 36 months from now, and then react accordingly. So you'll hear more about that in upcoming months.
Part of what we're going to have to do is clarify material project budget changes from 22 to 23. A number of projects have increased significantly, not only over the last year, but over the last several years. So there are a lot of existing projects. I'm going to have to go back during the summer and fall and ask departments, is the pricing still the same? Perry is not my best friend in that respect because he calls me consistently and goes, I'm sorry to tell you, Keith, said project has increased. And I grind my teeth and we grind our teeth together and then we move on. But it's a regular occurrence. We've got to evaluate the impact of the proposed CIP on expanded operating budget needs. This is a very real thing as we get bigger buildings, as we take on more buildings. I think in our budget we talked about taking on 7 new buildings. You don't take on the shops at Hope Valley without having increased annual operating costs related to running said building. And that's one example. You don't buy a Boys and Girls Club building without future annual operating costs. You don't build a new animal shelter potentially, or replace one, or expand one without those costs. So that's what we mean by always part of the whole process is how are some of these projects going to put pressure on our annual operating budget. And then we conduct sensitivity analysis, and that's how we, these are all the variables on the financial side that can affect what our payment is. And what I mean by that, there's the initial cost of a project, the timing of a project, but at the time we issue debt, what are the interest rates? What are the revenue projections I have for Durham County at that time? I say this half jokingly, part of the budget process to play with monopoly money. We're simply guessing next year's revenue source, but it gets even harder to guess 4 years out and 5 years out. And there's so many variables that all work together. The cost of the project 5 years out, the cost of borrowing debt 5 years out. What's our revenue growth going to be 5 years out? All that sensitivity analysis is something we run with our financial advisor and amongst ourselves. Are we conservative enough? Are we aggressive enough? This is our tentative plan. This may be the most important slide you see. These are the projects that have some questions about them. Ongoing discussions. We know the Board of Elections space is currently, we're working very hard and very diligently under a pretty tight time frame to get a Board of Elections office at the shops at Hope Valley. We have money budgeted for that. I don't think that any fundamental changes are happening there in terms of cost or planning timing. That has to happen sooner rather than later. The Sheriff's Training Facility, I have highlighted in red. Those are projects where the dollar amount has increased from when we originally put it. It's in the CIP. It hasn't been presented to you all yet. You agreed to these things, but some of the costs are increasing. Emergency Operations Center costs are increasing. The animal shelter, you obviously know about, and I think Perry may have sent you some updated information, and there may be questions about that. DSS Maine, renewable energy, and DPS. Some new projects that are very much a part of the CIP that weren't raised at the last CIP development process was a fleet maintenance and warehouse facility. That's not going to be a small dollar project, but it's new. Sheriff's Office Annex, that is in the RTP. There have been discussions about it. Doesn't mean we have to agree to it, but it's out there as a potential project. I don't remember the RTP folks coming in last week and talking to you all about a tax rate increase for the RTP district. Part of that was to support some public safety services out there. There may be some discussions amongst all involved about what a sheriff's office annex should be or should cost out there, but it's something we have to take into account. Some new discussions that haven't even been in front of the board nor have been in front of me that are not even part of the CIP are 1204 East Club and 808 East Pettigrew Street. I forget exactly what those. Boys and Girls Club, there you go, because we may not be done upfitting a building that we already paid for. The Lincoln Community Health.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. 1204 East Club is the CJRC Detox Transition House. That's a project that CJRC put in the last year's budget request for ARPA funding. But we've done some conceptual analysis on that, and we can share more information later.
We had $500,000 budgeted in the operating budget to update that project, but due to some classification issues with the state or whatever rules that Perry deals with, the cost of that project has increased to the point where it may need to be a CIP project rather than just something in an operating budget.
Wow. Listen.
This is something we had considered for ARPA, but the way we handle all of these, we put it on our list as capital. So you'll see even some of the enterprise fund related projects, there may be ARPA dollars that are identified to help support. We set aside in our plan for wastewater treatment or enterprise fund related. In the plan, there's $4 million set aside to support water, sewer, capital projects. So from our accounting of all the list, we start with them within the plan and then match up the funding source.
Commissioner Alam.
Thank you. I didn't want to interject because when you're on a roll, Keith, you're on a roll.
I know. It's hard.
On the ongoing discussion on the red one, can you just clarify, are those increases due to, I'm assuming part of it is due to the increase in cost of materials, but is any of it due to increase in scope or change?
It could be a combination of items. And if you may recall, when I talked about this a couple of days ago, I talked about how long the library was on the list. It was on the list before I left in 1997. I left in 2000, and it didn't actually come to fruition until a few years ago. So some may be on the list for a while, and the prices keep going up. So keep it in context as you see the different colors.
If there are any that are changes in scope, can we just receive like what?
Oh yeah, we would definitely. We'll give you. You'll have more information than you can imagine.
Thank you.
So we were going through some of the blue. Did you get enough? Thank you. And please tell me if I need to slow down. I am trying to move through this at a quick pace. The blues are new projects to the CIP that aren't in the CIP at all. The reds are projects that are in the CIP, but they have changed in price. Those are the two things. The black ones are in the CIP, just sort of there. They were in the CIP 2 years ago when you reviewed it. Okay? Maybe should have put a color key code on the slide, but hopefully. Another one is the Lincoln Community Health Center, and I think we have budgeted money in this 23-24 budget to do some pre-development process, basically to assess what they need to do, but be sure and believe that that assessment is going to turn around and come back probably with a multi-million-dollar request from the county to support some sort of capital related issues.
It's on the add delete list.
Ma'am?
It's on the add delete list.
The pre-planning, the pre-development funding.
And let me just say that is a joint, should be a joint DuCal system, Durham County project, whatever happens. So
Okay.
we need to make sure that's the context.
The shops at Hope Valley, we're not done assessing what needs to be done to prep a number of those spaces for incoming county offices or county departments. So that will be ongoing. And then another very potentially expensive one is the 2050 building performance mandate. I know we talked about renewable energy over on the other side, but this may be a version of that. How do we prep our buildings for future, am I correct in that, Perry? Sort of energy savings and meeting some of the guidelines and goals that we hope to achieve. That wasn't in the budget 2 years ago. Renewable energy was, but this is going to, The renewable energy was a larger overarching plan. These are getting into more specific direct steps of what to do with buildings. The enterprise fund, you can see 3 new pump station projects that have been added since the CIP was approved 2 years ago and discussed 2 years ago. Those are not cheap projects. Those are enterprise fund projects. They are supported with fees to the users of the system, but those fees will probably grow substantially to make the debt service payment for those types of projects. All right. Any questions about what you see up here before I move on?
What, the new admin building, what are we doing to the new admin?
That is that is a new admin building down where the Triangle wastewater treatment plant is.
Gotcha.
All right. For the enterprise fund. Just so you know, if you're curious and you want to catch up on the CIP, we have a Power BI version of it up under the Budget Department website for the county. If you go there and you select on Capital Improvement Plan documents, that top link, June 22 updated Capital Improvement Plan, will give you the budgeted numbers for all the projects we have in the CIP. Remember, the CIP is a plan. It is not actuality. It is hoped for. So you might see some projects like DSS that were funded in the CIP 2 or 3 years ago, but you know we haven't done anything. That's because it was a plan 2 years ago, and we still haven't moved on. We haven't made a decision as a group yet what exactly to do and where. So plan. But the information is there. Just an idea of how the money is distributed along the strategic plan that we've had in place for the last couple of years. It's largely in Goal 1. That's focused largely on Durham County projects. I won't go over this. You can look at this. It's in the slides. What I do want you to notice, most of the spending of this CIP is largely front-ended in the first 5 years rather than the next 5 years. That's normal for most of our CIPs. We know what's going to happen a little bit more clearly in the next 5 years than we do the second 5 years. So we're always a little more heavily oriented towards the first 5 years. Why is 22, 23 so big? Does anyone care to take a guess? Pop quiz. GeoBond referendum and the hope and the expectation that DPS, DTCC, and the museum were going to kick it into gear, high gear, on spending some of that $550 million that was approved. Draft master facility plan, the last one that we have from 21 is linked in here. It's also, I think, linked on the website back here. The 21 facility master plan, second link, so you can find that there. If we get any updates to that plan, if Perry sends that to me, we will send that out to all the commissioners. Where is the CIP right now? It's at $1.9 million. Ma'am? Billion, excuse me. Yes, billion. Most of that is in Durham Public Schools by far. Next biggest would probably be community colleges, and then progressively down through IT projects you see are significant. And it's important. We run on technology, and we have to keep upgrading that technology through a number of areas. We also have significant projects in water and sewer, but that's largely enterprise fund. It is all enterprise fund. It's not going to be paid for with general fund dollars. Again, this is what we're going to be updating. This is sort of the current CIP, recognizing that we haven't included a bunch of the blue projects on that other page. Remember the new projects? So there's a lot more to change about this. Yes, ma'am.
On this chart, where would like the animal shelter be? Under which of these departments? Not under sheriff, I don't think.
I would have to,
based on the numbers.
I would have to look and see where it is. It might be under the sheriff.
I think we're spending more than that.
Yes, ma'am, you're right. We have it. It's 27 million. David, do you have it up? Under engineering.
Okay.
29.8, but that's a perfect example. Perry has already sent out to us updates, and I'm sure there'll be some questions about that. That project was at 30 million 2 years ago. It's now estimated to be 45 to 50 million or more, depending on what everyone decides and agrees upon. That's 15 to 20 million more that's not in our CIP that we would have to find funding for. That was one of the red projects, just one. 2026 is the planned next general obligation bond referendum.
Yeah, the timing of it needs to coincide with our spend level with the current, yeah. And so, at one point we looked at possibly 2024, but it's too early. We would not have spent a significant amount. And as we go for reviews to determine the viability of doing a referendum, we would get a lot of pushback potentially on that. But 2026 is where we landed with the most recent version. So we did explore with our FA that scenario. We have the capacity and the ability to use LOBs as an option for projects that are pressing, but there are also pros and cons with that as well. But we've gotten such great rates because of our solid fiscal structure, so we will feel comfortable with that approach as well.
Claudia, is there a maximum amount of limited obligation bonds we can use? A dollar amount, I mean?
The challenge is you have to pledge, so for GO bonds, there is a max. Well, for limited obligation bonds is the challenge. You have to basically pledge an asset for it, whereas general obligation bond, you're taking it to the voters and stuff. And so it's our asset value, and I know we worked with the schools with some recent issuances, and so we just have to be creative in how. But when we take away our LOBS capacity we want to build an animal shelter that is larger, and all these other priorities, you have to keep in the forefront. If you're doing other big ticket items, whether it's for the schools or Durham Technical Community College, what does that mix do down the road? And so it's a very coordinated effort.
I think financially, if you look in our ACFR, and I think I actually have it on the debt service page in the budget document, there's a maximum amount of debt we can incur in the $2 billion plus range, far above what we have. To Claudia's point, what type of debt matters. If you were willing to put everything on the general obligation bond and let voters approve it, you could have a lot of debt without any assets as the backing, because the voters are backing property taxing capability. That's what makes general obligation bonds so attractive. But we don't normally put things like an animal shelter on a general obligation bond referendum. We don't put jails or detention centers. We don't think they will pass. To that end, when you don't put it on general obligation bonds, you are largely left with limited obligation bonds, which have to usually have an asset. The problem is we don't have a whole lot of assets that aren't already on previous LOBS financing. We don't have unlimited assets. In fact, for the schools, when we do LOBS with them, we have to work with agreements to put some of the schools' stuff as an asset to ability to use LOBS until we do another GO bond referendum. As a general rule, putting as much as possible on a GO bond referendum works better as long as it gets approved.
Yeah. One question about the emergency services. What's happening with the fire station?
We don't, go ahead, Perry, were you going to? We don't normally do fire stations. Are you talking about EMS stations with fire stations?
Yes. We've been asked so many times about that.
So in the information that Keith mentioned earlier, you'll see emergency operations services. Those are the 3 projects that we classified as sort of high priority, and that is all of them are co-locations, of course, fire and EMS co-locations. But we have the one that's recognized as Far East, which is the Kemp Road development that you guys are very interested in. We also have another one at MLK. Both of those, Kemp Road and MLK, would be sited on city-owned property. So we've been working with them for months, sort of trying to figure out the timing and when this would work best to fit both of our CIPs and our operations plans. The other project is the Duke West site. And so those are the 3 fire/EMS co-locations that are considered under operations.
Is there anything planned for Leedsville Road out in that area?
We already have the new station on
We have,
Leesville Road.
yeah, we have
That's the
one.
fire
Is there
station,
another,
number
it's not,
17.
is there another one planned for that area?
The Kemp Road will sort of serve the area just north of the Leesville area
Okay.
where all the development is going.
Okay,
So that's why that's a priority. So,
got it.
yes, ma'am.
So I'd have an answer when people ask, because
Kemp Road,
community is real interested in that.
Kemp Road, that's the one that everybody wants and needs. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
This graph, I hope it's not overwhelming. What I want you to get from this graph is sort of to show the top part of the graph shows the growth in debt we're taking on over the next 10 years. The green debt is new debt. I mean, we're always paying off old debt, but we're taking on new debt. And what you notice more than anything else is we're taking on a lot of new debt. We're growing from our teenage years in Durham County. We're growing into adulthood here with an almost $1 billion annual budget coming sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
The bottom part of that graph shows you the funding source necessary to pay for this. Remember, by board policy, you all have set, well, this board set way back multiple decades ago, you allot Article 40 and 42 sales tax, you allot occupancy tax, and then you also use dedicated property tax to pay for annual debt service. What I want you to see is how much you're starting to lean on property tax to start paying for this increasing debt. What I also want you to know is property tax you have control over. Sales tax you do not have control over. I'm expecting growth in sales tax, but if we were to have a recession or a slowdown in our economy, that might mean changes in how much we would have to support our annual debt service with additional property tax instead. So there is some variability in our revenue sources, particularly when we look out into the future. The point being is for our ability to take on future debt, we're largely going to have to use growth in property tax revenue, which means a property tax rate increase. And that little red line you see down at the bottom, that is the current CIP. That's without additional costs for animal shelter or whatever other choices that may be coming in the upcoming CIP review. This is where we're at. We are increasing from 8.61 cents to 10.11 cents. That's a 1.5 cent tax rate increase as part of the 23-24 budget. You're voting on that increase. And then I'm expecting a 0.5 cent tax rate increase needed next year, depending on the timing of things. And if revenue's coming better than we expect, we may not come back to you as part of the recommended budget next year with a 0.5 cent. But I'm betting that we will. Then it stays flat, but then you see a 2 cent increase in 2026. Why 2 years from now? Because it normally takes us 2 years to spend general obligation bonds. We do short-term issuance of that, and then we take on the long-term debt. So we're not going to have a $5, $6, $10 million annual debt service payment till around 25, 26. But then we've got to pay for it with a 2 cent tax rate increase. So ultimately, we're going from 10.11 cents to 13.61 cent in related property tax rate for capital-related debt service, but that's without considering any of these new projects. That's with a great environment for revenue collection. If those numbers change, and they might, then these property tax rate changes may change for the better or for worse. Let's not forget, they have changed for the better. You all told the voters, we told the voters a year ago, a year and a half, that it might be a 2.5 cent or 2 cent tax rate increase related to the general obligation bonds. Because revenues have done so well, sales tax in particular, we only had to do 1.5 cents so far. Yes, ma'am.
And we go back.
To our advantage or our disadvantage? We don't.
And we will come to the board in a couple of weeks to do a transfer from our capital finance fund balance to our debt service fund balance so that we can move those dollars into the reserve. That'll be on your 26th meeting, but just wanted to point that out from a fund balance perspective. It's being moved into that fund. from a sensitivity analysis, I know I talked a little bit about it when we talked about the transit issue. We used the same approach when looking at that model, and that's why we said, hey, there needed to be some type of cushion in that way. So it's the same concept, but has served the community well, and we're hoping that we continue to grow so that we see in a good position.
It will be a significant move of fund balance from one fund to another, but it is somewhat of a technical issue from a calculation. Don't let the numbers scare you. It's not doing anything with the money. It's just moving it from one pot and acknowledging it in another pot. Yes, ma'am.
So along those lines, because we are, fiscally prudent and we hire you to help us be that way, thank you so much. And just what you were saying, so about the fund balance, does that then mean that it's possible, can't predict for sure, but it's possible that we'll actually need less of that fund balance, to meet the costs?
Well, if the costs
go down.
If we look back at that list of all the projects coming online, I see a 40% increase.
Okay.
Easily.
Yeah.
When I look at inflationary costs and then the number of big ticket items, I would not be surprised if we have $2.8 billion worth of requests.
Okay. Wow, Claudia. Wow. Okay, thanks.
And I may be wrong. I'm hoping I am.
Yeah.
But just based on historical requests and that number that Keith showed, the 1.9, it was reduced somewhat. We often just push it out, but I don't see it getting lower.
As the scope and scale and the size of our CIP grows, the amount of fund balance we need to carry as an offsetting sort of pressure release number needs to grow in size as well. And I think that's part of what's happening here. We have a healthy fund balance related to debt service, but we also use it to not have to go up 3 and 5 and 6 cents or in any one year. And as Claudia said, with whatever's coming down the pike in the next 6 months as we update the CIP, I'm concerned that we may need to apply fund balance to try to either pay straight cash for some things or minimize some of the fluctuation out in future years. But it's very possible we may see a 5-cent increase, property tax rate increase needed over the next 10 years. That's guessing. I'll be quiet. I don't want to freak people out. I don't know what that number is going to be. But that's where fund balance is going to be applied generously to try to help with that. Yes, ma'am.
I will just add that where there are opportunities for us to apply for grants to cover the cost of some of this, we have done that as well. So it may be minimal, but I can think of, I know the Emergency Operations Center we applied for a grant for, and then also some of the water and sewer utility projects we apply for grants for as well.
Draft CIP time highlights from July 23 to winter 24. That could be the early January, February of 2024. We'll go through CIP guidelines. We'll start communicating with departments and getting them to develop updated CIP requests on existing projects and potential new projects. We will then have project discussions. After we gather that information, we will show you all some of those projects that are being requested. Then we will review these projects against the facility master plan, come together with a draft CIP and a draft capital financing plan, which is the other side of that. There's the CIP that says, this is what we're going to do and this is how much it costs, and the CFP is this is how we're going to pay for it over time. Those two go hand in hand. At the board discussions on the draft or the manager's recommended CIP, we'll have financial advisor review of the CIP, public discussion, and hopefully you will approve the next CIP before we begin in earnest the 24-25 budget development process sometime in early winter 2024. Questions?
Yeah, I don't see Durham Public Schools on here in terms of updating conversations with them.
They should have been. That was just a typo.
Yeah, and you see DTCC twice. It should have been DPS.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They are our biggest. They are our biggest.
I have some comments to
they
make, but I'll wait till you're done. But yeah.
That was the last slide. We are done.
Okay.
Comments.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're going to really dig in. So first of all, when we talk to Durham Public Schools, I'm really concerned, you know, especially we know the Northern high school budget came in, we ended up spending a whole lot more than we started out with, and now getting into DSA. I personally think I don't want to talk about the new projects without having a conversation about how their former high school sites get used. You know, when we're fiscally constrained and we're asking Durham residents to, you know, pay higher taxes, and we're doing a bond to pay for new schools, and we're not also having a conversation about how those former school sites get used, I'm concerned about that. Those are public assets that have been used to, you know, purchased with Durham County dollars, and I don't know legally. I'm looking at the county attorney, but that's I mean, I've brought it up ad nauseum. I know people are sick and tired of hearing me bring it up, but when, you know, as we have less and less, you know, thanks to the state, we have so many needs that keep falling on us at the local level, whether it's paying for new schools, paying for renovations, paying for salaries, then we have to look at all of the assets that we have invested in. And so I just hope that we're going to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation and analysis of that land, whether it can be used for some other public use, whether revenue, I mean, whatever. They're just, that has to be part of the conversation. I know I personally am getting to the point where I'm going to start voting against stuff because people are not talking about this. That's how I feel about it. I'm really frustrated. So I'm just, you know, I look forward to that in the future, but, you know, or even, you know, when we look at issues around teacher salaries, you know, we haven't gone anywhere with the affordable housing issue for educators or school staff. Well, whatever the question, whatever we need to be doing, you know, to me, that's part of the conversation. But I just, yeah. So, and then, you know, just how we're tracking these projects and things like that. But anyway, I just want to put that out there, because especially related to the former Northern school site, and then DSA, the site, to be part and parcel with any, you know, funding issues with that.
Ethan, we'll give you 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I know we're funding 7 new facilities. If we could get a list of those, I wasn't sure what they all were. And then I think in this discussion that with a reckoning about when we buy things, we also have to think about how we maintain them, and then the operational costs, and whether we should have some type of analysis, because I know we're really good at making the saying yes to great opportunities to buy things, but it would be good if we had some policy or decision-making analysis that helps us really have the big picture. Because if we keep buying things, I mean, it's just like a personal thing, right? You keep buying stuff, but then you can't maintain and take care of what you have, and you're not fulfilling obligations like the animal shelter that you said you were going to do. I think it gets problematic. So I think having a really good framework going forward would be very helpful to us with decision making. Oh, and then what? Okay, I'll wait for the add delete to this, because I was wondering if something like the Lincoln feasibility study could be covered under ARPA funds.
Anything else for you?
I see you all writing madly as Wendy talks, and that's great, but I don't feel quite as strongly as she does about, leaning on the school board for what they're planning to do with all their land. I mean, I would be happy to ask them, do they have plans, and let us know what plans they have. But I know they're going to need new schools in the future, and yeah, I expect that they have some thoughts on how they want to use their land and what they think the highest and best value, public value for it is. So I just like to defer to their, to the fact that they're an elected body on that. And, clearly it's their decision. I think it's really fair for us to ask, what is your decision on these things? And maybe that's all you mean, Wendy. So just.
To make sure I'm clear, I heard two things as well. The budget office, as part of the CIP, can very much ask DPS, what are you doing with the land that you may be moving from? It's a different question entirely to say, we are curious what you're doing with the land for any purpose, because the county may have interest in what, and that's a higher level discussion than a CIP review. Just to make that clear.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And we talked about before having broader policy conversations, because there are other DPS-related type policy questions that the superintendent and manager would frame for future discussions, and especially in light of recent state actions, just how we move longer term.
Yeah, and there's something else, a totally different subject. Has there ever been any strong consideration given to having a small RGO bond for green initiatives? I see on here renewable energy and performance of buildings, as drivers of cost increases going forward. And so I think the voters would be excited to approve a green bond kind of initiative. So I wanted to ask y'all if you've thought about that.
Yeah, we did, when we went through the bond referendum process, we talked about it. We actually, our FA, our financial advisor, gave insight. That is an option because we have the instruments, because the limited obligation bonds are available for us, and we're so solid, we get great rates. It just depends upon at what level, but that is something we can consider. But we did research that. It is an option, but we've been able to handle thus far those types of expenses through our normal instruments financing. Oh, yes, absolutely.
You're about the 2050.
In general, yes. And when you look at inflation in general, so we know that overall plan is going to go up a percentage plus the new. Yes, ma'am.
And also, anything around energy, that document that I sent out to all the board members, you may not have had a chance to look at it yet. I would hope that we will get that to Tobin and have her go through that, because there's an awful lot of money related to that document after meeting with Henry McCoy in D.C. the other week, that we just need someone like Tobin to dive into it to see what resources are there for us. So if you would just ask her to, I don't know if you received the document or not. I
haven't seen it either.
Lachelle has it. Lachelle is going to send
We'll
it out
forward it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes.
It's come up at DAB, but I don't know whether you.
Yeah, this is a different one. It's, I can't remember the numbers. Ms. Pierce might remember the dollars that from energy, Department of Energy, that he's over, that's coming to North Carolina. And I don't know when, and I know that the money will go directly to Department of Energy.
And the other thing that we have to do as a staff is look at not just our CIP projects, but across our organizations to see what are some definite initiatives we can implement to achieve our renewable energy goals, what's in our plan. And we haven't done that. And so in order for us to, put a GO bond out, we really need to know for ourselves how we will spend that money. And so that's something that we are working on, because we want to make sure we are really being prudent about how we spend those dollars. We have, is it about 30 million in the CIP for, I can't remember.
For renewable energy?
Yes.
I don't know that it's quite that much, but that number was based off a spreadsheet and needs to be hardened up significantly.
Right. So we need to refine how we plan to achieve our goals.
Okay, your 5 minutes up. So
Can I,
you can come back to us doing the add and deletes if you want to add something else. I hate to
no adding, nope.
keep our folks waiting back there. Go ahead, finish what you're going to say.
About the green bonds, that is a concept that I don't know much about. I know that, are we talking only, are we only talking about what the county's doing to its own buildings, or are we talking about something that citizens have proposed that's a larger issue, and or both? Because we're talking about something that's...
We do things with our own county buildings and schools.
Okay. But it's still internal to us, and I'll defer to Perry and...
Yeah, I would, real quick, Tobin is in the process of getting the assessments done for what can be done to all county facilities to bring them up to renewable energy standards. And so once we get that document, we certainly can further the conversations and get more input from upper management and staff about what else can be done above and beyond that and the timing of everything. So we'll certainly follow up on that. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you much. Let's, all right, let's have the Museum of Durham History, if you will come up. Hi, Patrick, welcome. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Okay.
Okay.
Technology, sorry. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Museum of Durham History and our staff, I want to thank the County Commission for inviting me today, especially Commissioner Alam for her board service and Chair Howerton for her past board service to the museum. We appreciate this body's support, and it's always great to see you all at our exhibit openings and public programs. I also want to express gratitude to the Commission for your ongoing annual support of the museum, which is now at $76,000, and your commitment to support our education program. I'm here today to discuss a request we are making in addition to that ongoing annual support. Included in this request is $568,000 for architectural design and development phases for a future Museum of Durham History concept at 500 West Main Street. Preparing for this stage of our growth over the next fiscal year is critical for the museum's future. Our process aligns with the cultural roadmap, rail trail mapping, with the museum at the trailhead, and fulfilling the recommendation of the Racial Equity Task Force for a new Museum of Durham History, all projects which identify the museum as a key priority. As the museum enters its 10th year of operations, we continue to celebrate our achievements and reflect on our accomplishments. This past school year, thanks to the work of Durham Public School staff, our board vice chair, Bettina Umstead, and our staff, especially our director of education programs and exhibits, Michelle Needham, who came on board last summer. Over the last year, 150 Faces of Traveling exhibit, shown there on the left, went from Rogersher Middle School to Durham School of the Arts to Sherwood Githens Middle School. At each location, we work with the educators on site to conduct program assessment, activity development, and work to constantly improve its impact based on real-time feedback. As part of our current exhibit, The Life and Legacy of Floyd B. McKissick Sr., we developed a traveling exhibit called Ella's for Legacy, shown on the right, where elementary school-age students learn from the adult McKissick children about what it means to be part of a generational legacy. It was first displayed in Durham County Library and then made its way to local elementary schools. This is in addition to the numerous field trips and school groups the museum hosts throughout the year. Most recently, Chair Howerton and Commissioner Alam helped chaperone students from Carrington Middle School on their downtown scavenger hunt, starting from the museum, just as the buses for Glen Elementary were pulling up to their trip to the museum. We take on a lot, but we do it with pride because of its importance. An economic impact report by Discover Durham estimated the museum's added value at over $1 million. We're seeing in-person attendance at 15,000 visitors annually post-2020. We need the city and the county to commit to seeing the project for a new museum through. It's a free education resource and should be considered like the public library when it comes to improving community health. Durham's History Museum should be shared responsibility of the city and county and the organization which operates it. So we're proposing that the city and county collaborate to support the design and construction and ongoing operations. There are existing examples of such partnerships, such as the Museum of Life and Science, a county-supported facility on city-owned property. And many of the other projects that I referred to earlier, the Racial Equity Task Force, the Cultural Roadmap, and the Rail Trail really rely on the museum's planning for their future designs. Last August, we presented to the Joint City-County Planning Committee about the need for a new Museum of Durham history, one that doesn't buckle or experiencing diminishing returns if more than 15 school children are in it at once. We've grown this museum and its reach organically. Now we're poised to take the next step to keep pace with growth in Durham and fulfill the increasing public demands asked of a free educational resource. Look at our main library. Out-of-town visitors marvel at the gorgeous multi-purpose facility that does so much more than house books and free computer stations. Durhamites have come to expect the same level of forward-thinking accessibility and engagement when learning about our history and what shapes our community. And we believe that the best option is to maintain and develop our site. We can confidently say to the public that we've served that after 10 years, we're not just a plucky little startup, but an essential education institution with a proven record of success, which is now woven into the cultural fabric of Durham. We came away from the meeting last August with a renewed sense of purpose and a clear eye of what we needed to do next on our end to help elected officials and their staff support this vision. We have worked with Vines Architecture, who as far back as 2015 recognized the museum's potential and developed program studies to map out how the museum could maximize future space and provide what the public needs. Our next step was to go back to them to estimate the costs for designing this facility. As we went back to Vines for an estimate to estimate the cost of building and designing the facility, the design phase is what brings us here today, reflected in yellow plus due diligence for another site. The two phases at the top, plus the due diligence to assess 505 West Chapel Hill Street, brings us to the $568,000 reflected in the budget request document you have before you. In addition to the architect fees to jumpstart the project, we include other requests. 4 digital look beyond the windows exhibit panels to replace the existing static physical panels. As Durham skyline changes, digital window panels allow us some future-proofing of our exhibits. 2 rotating exhibit gallery touchscreens, one of which houses our popular touchscreen timeline. And also 10% salary increases for existing full-time staff. An increase of the part-time weekend management staff from $17 an hour to $20 an hour. And a full-time permanent development staff position. To date, we have seen a 35% revenue increase as well as support in marketing, event planning, community engagement, and donor stewardship from a quarter-time role over the last 2 years. Looking ahead, fund development becomes even more important as we ramp up for a major new facility and expanding program opportunities. We are requesting city and county to split this. Delays or lack of funding will set back future museum planning for at least another year and will also affect the projects such as the roadmap and rail trail, which rely on our input. Now is the time for us to move forward. With downtown's emergence in the last 15 years as a place to live, work, and be entertained, our contributions as one of the very few public free amenities only grows. With thousands of new residents moving to Durham every year, we are vital to letting them know about our unique, complex past and how that has shaped our present and will shape our future. Communicating that story candidly and with emphasis on our diversity and commitment to equity helps newcomers and longtime Durhamites alike understand and appreciate what makes Durham special. Our vibrant, forward-thinking, and past-appreciating community deserves a history museum that both tells these stories and is worthy of Durham as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century. I appreciate your time and would love to hear any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for your presentation. I'll turn it over to the board members. Questions, comments?
Yes, Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming at the last minute. You know, I guess we talked about this last at a joint city-county meeting in August, and it does feel frustrating that I feel like we didn't hold up our end of things. I remember that meeting. We said that we would start a subcommittee of the city and the county to start hashing out these things, and we didn't do that. So I apologize that we did not hold up our end of that bargain. And I think we really need to get going on this. I mean, we've lost a whole year, and, you know, you're like the little engine that could, right? All the stuff that you do with the space you have. But for where Durham is at now, and the size of our facility it's embarrassing, frankly. My brother is heading the creation of a new museum right now, the Borscht Belt Museum in Ellenville, New York. And at Thanksgiving, I brought him to see our museum, and because I thought it would be a great role model for him, and you know, because of the community focus and telling the story and everything. And the McKissick exhibit was there then. And, you know, he was like, well, this is great, but, like, this is what you guys have for the city of Durham, really? You know, and so, yeah. So we really need to get going on this. So I have a few questions. One is, what is the status of the city's position on, because the current facility is on city-controlled land. Have you made any progress yet in those conversations with being able to continue being on that specific site?
We've made inquiries to the city regarding the status of our land. We have, about 2 years ago, we did a renewal of our current lease. It was 15 years with 2 5-year options, and that was the most they were willing to give us at that time. And so since then, we have been kind of asking that question of what is the status of this land and our permanence, because we all know that without a significant agreement in place for that site, we cannot do any kind of development, design, fundraising, privately or publicly, if there is not. So we continue to ask the city.
So, I mean, related to that, and I'm thrilled that you all are working with Vines. They did our main library, and they're fantastic. You know, it does beg the question of investing in designing for that site without knowing that we can use that site. So I think that for me personally, I would like to, and I guess we have a joint city-county meeting coming up.
We do tomorrow. Not tomorrow.
The 13th.
The 13th.
And it was really important for you to come here because everyone on our board is not at joint city-county. Right. But, you know, I hope that we can get a process going ASAP with staff, with obviously, you know, Commissioner Lom being on there, but I would love to participate as well. But where we really get working and get some of these things figured out, because before we invest in doing a design, we really need to know where is the site, where's the site going to be, and can it continue to be there? I know the city is also doing an RFP or RFQ related to the old former police headquarters. So what is your knowledge of that right now?
We've had informal and private discussions, casual discussions with the city about that site. We have not had any kind of formal engagement about our role at that site.
Okay. I mean, I think one of the things that we may need to do is, you kind of referred to it, if you go back, you called it something, but we may need to do an assessment basically on location. And I'm looking at Lou Myers in the back here. Bob and Lou had a conversation with him a while ago to really understand what are the pros and cons of each location, what would be the impacts of it being where it is right now versus if it was moved. I think that actually may be one of the first things that we really need to do, is understand that, and whether, you know, that's something that we, the city and the county, could fund that wouldn't be that expensive.
I believe in the attachments, there's also, in the budget request final document, there is a line, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, in there about the test fit study.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. I believe it's 22,000 without.
I mean, 22,000, I mean, we can easily, the city and the county, fund that. But to me, that would be one of the most important first things to do, because we need to understand where is the best location and what are the costs, the pros and cons, and, you know, of all of that. And then it seems to me that the design part would really come after that. In terms of the request for, like, you know, exhibiting and, you know, staff salaries, those are very minimal things. The development, do you not have a development person now?
We have a contractor that we work with a quarter time.
Okay, so what is this development manager?
This would be bringing that person on as a full-time staff member.
Okay, full-time rather than part-time. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to respond?
I was just going to say about the site, 500 West Main Street. Really, we're hoping that the county and the city can get together and you know, clarify that between the two entities about, you know, where is the museum's permanent home and what is the path.
So I'm complex. So first of all, like Wendy had just mentioned, that I apologize as well, as we dropped out, pulling a team together, but hoping that you hear that now, you and Commissioner Lom, that you guys jump in and help to organize the team to do the research that need to be done. The mayor and I cannot do it all. So we need you guys pulling in to help. So one of the questions that I have related to the building, the old police station. So my understanding, and help clarify that you have said that you don't want that building, but to take you out of the budget as related to that. So help me to understand if that's not true, or if it is true. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Sure. The museum's board's position is that we would prefer to stay at 500 West Main Street where we currently are, and to develop that site because of its proximity to the rail trail and where it's situated downtown, in order to make something that is still accessible and free while everything around us becomes, as gentrification becomes a concern. We really do prefer that site. We are not opposed to having a conversation about alternative sites, but we have not yet been asked or engaged to formally be a part of any kind of development process for 505. It's more of been suggestions, or have you considered, what about, And our position's always been, sure, we're open to having the conversation, but we've not been asked formally to be a part of any kind of development.
You see how the conversations go. They get in the public conversations, and when it got to me, I was like, I hadn't heard that from Patrick, so let me just ask. Okay. So
You and me both.
yeah. So my colleagues over here got their hands raised, so I'll go to them, and then I'll come back. Go ahead, Commissioner Lum.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick, Bob, Lou, for coming out. As Wendy mentioned, the space that the museum is in right now is very, very tight. And when there was the opening event for the McKissick exhibit, like everyone was cramped in there, and that's such a significant event for our community, to be able to have a space that everyone can come and learn about Durham's history. And even when we had the field trip groups of the children that we were, me and Chair Howerton joined for chaperoning, even the children, like who were smaller people, were still crowded in the space. And like for the schools to be able to even see the Museum of History as more of an asset to utilize within their curriculum, I think is going to be a great benefit from an expansion. And I know it's a significant amount, but it's split between the city, hopefully, and we are going to have the joint city-county meeting next week where Patrick is going to be presenting as well. Manager Swell, I know you and I spoke about the committee that was supposed to be formed. Wendy brought that up earlier. If we can, when we meet next week at the joint city-county, it would be really beneficial if we have that brought up again and we start forming that and initiating the plan of what is our timeline for this.
So how would you like to be the chair for that committee?
I would love to.
Okay. Here you go.
I'm looking at our attorney. Okay, I would love to. So if we can get Museum of History board members, city, county officials, and start that work, so it doesn't fall off again for another year, because we can't miss out on, as Wendy mentioned, this work. With the staff development and the salaries, the living wage, this is something we've been talking about with all of our departments, is trying to get everyone up to a living wage. With the Durham Tech, we just talked about it with APS. And with the development officer, I'd like us, it's not a significant part of the budget request, but just to take into consideration for the board that that's a position that's going to bring in funding. So even though we're putting money towards it, it's going to pay for itself, and hopefully offset future costs of just being able to have someone fully dedicated to growing the Museum of History's budget. That was all my comments.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Great presentation. And I really have appreciated over the years the depth of expansion of your education components to Durham Public Schools in particular. I really think you all do a great job with that. And so, we are about, as a county, education. That tends to be our purview. Just trying to think about reasons that the request, makes sense from our sort of legislative and other roles that we play and what we oversee, so to speak. I'm really interested in knowing how, because I thought you made a good point, and you won't know the answer to this. I don't think I'm going to have to ask staff, but I thought you made a good point when you lifted up the fact that we have regular GO bonds, for the North Carolina Museum of Life and Science, another museum, and that they provide a significant amount of funding through fundraising and fees, which you all have not gone that route, the fee route. You're really trying to keep it accessible to everyone. Really appreciate that too. I think that's really part of your ethos. That's great. So I guess at some point, maybe an internal discussion within the county about what is our decision-making approach around funding requests from nonprofit museums, that have significant capital needs and, significant capital needs in particular. How do we decide which ones we're going to take on and consider funding for those significant capital needs, and which ones not so much. So, not now, not for, to be answered now. I'm just, I just think that's a good question for us to ponder, so we can be consistent.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much for coming today.
Yeah, so this is one that we funded before, but we have funded in conjunction with the city. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted to put it on the agenda for the 13th, so that the city and the county can hear the same information and have the conversation. And it's good for everybody on this board to hear it today. And then we appreciate you coming on the 13th to speak with both boards, so they can be in alignment as to what's going to happen.
I welcome the opportunity. Thanks. You all got a sneak preview of what will be next week.
Yeah, thank you.
I do think it would be so cool if you all were to expand on that type of review off of the Beltline. Just think having spaces like that along our railway system throughout Durham,
But
because there's things to do along the rail, like other cities.
And that's one thing we're working with the project manager on the Beltline to examine how those types of spaces complement each other.
I do wonder, though, politics is interesting. Who you have in office right now and who you can have in office in 24 can be different people. And my concern is always a different group of people come in that may decide to take the land. And if you don't have a guaranteed contract, what happens at that point?
And that's been one of our major questions, first and foremost, to the city, because it is their land. And so we've posed that to them before.
And separate from
because everybody wants to build a high rise. And if you don't have something that guarantees you the land for a certain number of years, what happens if the next mayor or city council decides they want to take the land and do something else with it?
I would love for that question to come up next week.
Yeah, I would love that. I'd love somebody to answer that, because it's their land. They have a right to do what they want with it. So, yeah, I'd like to know what that answer would be.
One last question. Separate to the land and the budget request around the expansion of the facility, related to the other items, the staff salary increases and the new positions and the exhibit panels, has the city provided any update on where they stand with those ones? Because I know with the land, there's the whole 505 West Chapel Hill, but these items?
We're still working with them on their decisions on that.
Okay.
Commissioner Jacobs?
I just want to note the other requests add up to $108,000, and that would be splitting. It would be $54,000 for each of us if we split it between the city and the county for that. Related to the site, I mean that's why I'm looking forward to the subcommittee, because that is a very key property, and we know from the county's experience we have been very successful at public-private partnerships, and it's conceivable that we could find a developer who was interested in building housing above the museum and would cover the cost of actually building, however, if it's a 2-story museum or whatever it is on that site. It's conceivable that there could be some type of public-private partnership where we get the public need filled, and then there's housing on top of it or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, but I think there are some opportunities, but we need to start working on it to see what they are.
And the museum wants to be a good partner with the city and the county about our role and our space. We definitely don't want to be petulant about our space and say, we need a new home, but not that one. you know, we definitely are open to having that dialogue. It's just that being a part of a formal development process hasn't come up yet at this time.
Well, I understand if that the preference of being where you are would be a major preference for me. Being on Chapel Hill Street, it's just kind of totally out of, people got to literally walk all the way. It's just not a good location. When you talk about, I would prefer downtown, but that's not my decision. I see, you want to come on up? Wait till you get to a microphone before we start talking. And say your name.
Lou Myers, resident.
See, our attorney helps us out.
Pardon me?
Our attorney helps us out.
Good. I don't want to get arrested for violating the regs. But anyhow, the question of the land, one, it's chicken and egg, but you have the answer because you, the county, built Life and Science on Durham city property. So however that deal was done, that's the answer to that question. Now, we can resolve that next week, but that's a precedent. So however that worked, and a 15-year lease plus options is nice, but they know for us to build. I think that they would give us the land or do what they need to do if there's a commitment to build on the site. So all I wanted to say is that's not a complicated issue, but you have the answer. Whoever put that deal together for Life and Sciences, that's the model. And the other point I was going to make is that we need a space, but the one thing I like is maybe 1-2 story, but to put 10 stories on there for apartments and all, it takes away from that place being a nice respite, because when that new tower goes up, you got another 32, who knows what's going to come. That's going to be a nice respite in this city where you can get some sunlight and see the sky. So anyhow, yeah, we love that site.
Okay. Appreciate it. All right, thank you, Lou. Anything else? All right, well, thank you for your presentation, and I'll see you on the 13th.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
All right.
Madam Chair, may I have a moment?
Yes.
So this particular funding item will likely come separately in our budget. I think you all are familiar with that process at this point of how we sometimes do a budget ordinance and then we do separate sort of voting, and hopefully you all know why we are doing that.
You're talking about for this item?
For this and ones like it.
Okay.
Whenever we have the budget, we also do separate voting because you all are members of these boards at times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the new state conflict of interest law. So I just wanted, it was a good time, since this was on the agenda, for me to remind you of this is one of those types of items that will be pulled out. So Commissioner Alam cannot vote on this item because she's a board member.
Right.
That is not a governmental board. That is a private not-profit. And some of you sit on private not-profit boards.
Right.
And there's a new state law that was created in Raleigh
Right.
that forbids you from doing things like voting and advocating for the budget of those organizations.
Yeah.
We're going to have a session when you all take a break in July, and we're going to talk in much greater detail about what that means.
We got it.
Because your vote is one part of it, your speaking is another part of it. And I'll explain what speaking is. And we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Got it. So this, we won't meet with the city until after we vote.
Different issue. We have in the 23-24 budget annual funding for the Museum of Durham History of $76,000.
Right.
What the attorney is speaking of is that at this point, Commissioner Alam will not vote on that portion. That will be pulled out of the budget ordinance. You all five will be a part of the budget ordinance, and then we will have a separate vote on the $76,000 going to the Museum of Durham History that Commissioner Alam will not vote on. What you heard today is not part of anything related to the budget yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would,
we
I would
can't-
ask that we not make, because it would put undue burden and stress on our staff to try to compile what we've heard today and get it in a place where commissioners could agree and we work with the city. So we can consider this after our June 12th. We can always consider the funding request, but I would ask that we not try to get it in the June 12th budget adoption. That
The
would be
additional funding that you just heard
That you
about,
just
the
heard about.
$76,000 for them to run the Museum of Durham History as it's always been run or currently, that is in the recommended budget that you will,
Okay.
except for Commissioner Long.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting more funding and having to meet with the city.
Yes, ma'am, that's a
Right.
whole different
Yeah,
issue.
that'll be after our budget.
And just wondering, I know it'll add some work. Is that around the whole item request that that the Museum of History just presented? I know we also discussed separating the two items of the request of taking out the building items and the remaining 100-something thousand.
108,000 for
I'm
ongoing.
asking that it all be held off until, as you recall, we just had a conversation with APS that staff is going to have to help us craft and get ready. I would ask that we not put all of these these ones that are just coming before us, because staff has not reviewed it. APS, the sheriff's office staff, has been talking about this. We have not reviewed this with the staff. So I am just asking, and I'm not even asking, I'm imploring and begging that you all not put this on our staff at this late date.
Right, but just to get clarity, what Keith said is what is already in the budget.
Right, you will
We
vote
can't
on that.
on that.
That will be, that's
Right,
in
but
for the 12th.
additional money, we would vote on that later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Before, we're so close to the end, before we get started on the add-delete list, Commissioner Carter spoke briefly about nonprofits. You were very specific, but I want to remind the board, as it relates to nonprofit funding requests that come to you all. Several years ago, we all made the great leap away from a large pool of money and a large pool of nonprofits being reviewed and a large pool of nonprofits coming to you all and asking individually or as groups to a process where we let subject matter experts, much like Kate Elander in early childhood. She has a chunk of nonprofit funding. They have a nonprofit funding that they allocate based on the needs that they feel are important. We took away the nonprofit process by agreement from the board so you wouldn't have the pressure each year to feel like you needed to bring up individual things. I only remind you of that because it's been 2 years and I could feel a little mission creep on everyone's part as nonprofits start coming to you all individually and asking. I remind you to either stay strong on the current policy that you approved, which is letting the subject matter experts, or we need to review the policy and change that as you all see fit. But you have a policy that I think you can lean on and say, we chose a couple of years ago to move it to those subject matter experts and let them be a part of the discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm so totally in agreement with what you're saying, because it depoliticizes the decision about who gets nonprofit funding. That seems like that's more for operations. I'm wondering if the same, in your opinion, applies to capital requests, and think about the Museum of Life and Science as a model, and how does that fit?
It doesn't. They are a different bird. That's a reasonable question. The only two nonprofits that I know that I think of as nonprofits that consistently get capital requests that bring them to us would be, number one, by and far, is the Museum of Life and Science. And they're part of the general obligation bond referendum and have been on multiple ones. They live in a different world. I don't even think they're comparable. Second, the only other one that I really know of would be the Museum of Durham History. If you think of the Lincoln Community Health Center as a nonprofit they have gotten capital funding from us on occasion. Museum of Durham History has never really, they've had plans and talked about it in the past, but they've had a bigger plan coming up now. So it's really only that I can think of off the top of my head is Museum of Life and Science and Lincoln Community Health Center. So there are not that many that come and ask for capital.
Okay, but just to be clear, the county is the one who owns the Lincoln building. Okay, so that's different. We don't own the Museum of Life and Science building, okay? But the county, we own the Durham Center for Senior Life building. We own the Recovery Response Center building. We own the Lincoln Community Lincoln Community Health Center. So I think that's different.
Different, yes, ma'am. So really, no nonprofit that I know, I mean, the small ones that.
I think their request is being made, you know, looking at the museum as a model. You know, they're hoping to become a larger.
The Museum of Durham History, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
They're definitely following that model.
But I would say, for me personally, I think of the museum similar to our libraries, that they are providing an educational purpose, and the county has always been, you know, education. That's why we fund the museum and Durham Tech. So whereas like other things are more culturally, entertainment or whatever, those are usually more city. But that's just in my own brain.
Okay, I think David is over there waiting on us.
Thank you for that little aside. We are almost to the end. We can see the finish line. We are at the add-delete portion of the budget process for the 23-24 budget. We went over this at the last budget work session. Highlighted in blue, either on your computer screens or up above, are items in the add-delete list that highlighted in blue above are items that aren't really arguable. These are changes to budgets that either the budget office found or departments found. These are minor issues. The net effect of those highlights in blues are actually $263,000 in savings to the county, so those are easy choices to make. We can go through those. They're not really decisions that the board needs to make. I mean, you can say to do or not do them, but we would really appreciate you agreeing to these things. These are sort of technical changes. An example being the ABC board got in contact with us after the manager's recommended budget and said they were proposing going up $100,000 in revenue. We're like, yay. So we put that in after the manager's recommended budget. Cool. You can choose not to accept it. I would advise you do choose it. So there are things like that. You can do that one. There's a food security assessment plan. You get some of those things. Another major decrease was economic incentive payouts for next year, as Andy updates with some of the companies that have recently moved to our area. If they're not meeting some of their challenges or goals, then our payouts won't go to them, and so he's reduced that down. The big money items, the discussion items are here in purple. These are ones that we have heard from, either direct requests from board members or things that have been brought up in budget work sessions. David is scrolling down. So we're going to go through the purple items, but the net effect is about a plus $1.4 million in additional funding that we have to find, and how would we fund that?
So do we have that amount in our budget, in our funds, that we don't have to raise taxes?
Yes, the simple answer is, of course, we can use fund balance and move on, and that's probably what we might do. Okay. The problem with using fund balance is you're using your savings account dollars to pay for ongoing needs. Not all of these things up here are ongoing. A big chunk of them are. I do want to notice, David, I think we took the 7.5% increase for position 75,000 below out. I think there was a decision made at the end of the last meeting, so let's take that out. So now we're down. See how quickly we cut it from 1.4 million? 600,000 is gone. We're only down to 800.
Can we identify what the one-time expenses would be?
Yes.
So Keith, I think,
The sleep.
Asked before, could we use the ARPA funding for the Lincoln study? That would remove 300,000.
So, David, will you put a revenue source on 300,000 with the Lincoln Health Center? So that's now we've gone down from 800 to 500,000. We're making a quick work of all of this. One-time money would be for the Boys and Girls Club 2 vans that Chair Howerton brought up. It's $80,000. Obviously, those are just one-time purchases. The rest of it is the forensic community support team. I don't know if that's an ongoing. I'm betting it's ongoing.
Their proposal was that it would be supplanted with Medicaid expansion, then it would, I think it was for 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
So do they need all the money at this year's budget?
Proposal was for
They do?
to start with 492,000. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The one that wasn't on this list last time we met is the gun safety proposal request. I believe a couple of commissioners brought that up and thought it was coming, and we did realize after talking with Assistant County Manager Joanne Pierce that yes, indeed, that was a request. That's $118,000 that we have put on here if you want to follow through with that.
That's for 3 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now that we've
Commissioner Alam.
removed a bunch of things,
Ma'am?
now that we've removed a bunch of things, let's add some. I'm just joking. This is something that came up last time we met, and Commissioner Burns isn't here to bring it up. It was the item that, is really important that she's been raising around the stenographer. Have we figured out if we talk to Rod, is that added into the budget?
No,
She asked
she
that we
used that as an
withdrew it.
example of her not bringing something and
She withdrew that
proposing to
request.
you all to limit adding things, is how I understood that. We had that exact conversation in our budget office. I understood that as like, she purposefully didn't add it now.
She withdrew the request.
Correct.
She originally asked us about it and then withdrew the request.
But can we get an update from staff on that? Because
We can get an update,
Yeah.
give you an update on that. As a matter of fact, when we came to the board, I think it was on the February 28th budget work session, or it was a meeting, I believe, that day. We talked about the stenographer and the equipment and some conversations around them moving forward with a contracted employee. And that step is in process. And what Commissioner Burns talked about was the potential of having another part-time person,
OBGYN.
but that
She
was not
getting an OBGYN is what she was really trying. And if you want to elaborate, ACM Pierce?
Voice? Oh, yes. Good afternoon, Joanne Pierce, Assistant County Manager. So just as Commissioner Burns talked about the last time, and I mentioned that the family planning and maternal health clinic is operational 5 days a week, and it does have the OB/GYN 2 days a week and advanced practitioners the 3 days a week. And to Commissioner Burns' point, to have another day for the OB/GYN may not be practical. However, we have those services provided every single day. And for the sonographer, the contracted work is in progress, so we can have someone who is certified to operate the equipment.
So just to clarify, we will be able to have the ability to do the sonograms every day? Is that what you're saying?
We have to work through that, and that is the plan and the goal, so that we could be able to help those who are coming for those services. We just need to get the person in place and then the equipment in place so that we can provide the services.
So you'll have to hire one other person.
A sonographer.
It's not, okay.
And that's going to be a contracted, though, service.
Yes, that was the discussion, yes.
So it's, it won't be anybody we hire. It's going to be contracted.
Okay, and so we don't need to provide any more funding right now for that, or?
There has not been a request from public health.
Okay, but I think our board absolutely wants to make sure that that's available, so you'll let us know if we need to help with that.
All right.
And my second question, around the vans, just wondering, and this is more so I guess a question for Attorney Andrews, of if we're purchasing vehicles for an outside entity, what is like the liability to the county and what type of agreements get put in place if we're the one purchasing it? Like, if, God forbid, anything were to happen, like, we just gonna,
We
okay.
won't be responsible for, I'm sorry.
We're going to have the JD portion of the conversation now. Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Right.
Attorney.
So who the vehicles are titled to is where we start. Are we giving money or making a donation of a vehicle and then that's it? Or are we maintaining and operating the vehicles would be my first question. If we're providing, so I see some people doing this and some people doing that. Okay. I think what the idea would be to provide for through giving the vehicles or providing the vehicles, but we're not going to operate them.
Yeah, I think the proposal was the resources to buy the vehicles.
Right.
So is that right, David?
Correct.
We're not,
That's
we won't be responsible.
right. We typically will give the dollars to support the
Acquisition.
purchase. We had several examples of that with some of the ARPA-funded activities as well.
None of that was on the recording, but what I think that was, if we're simply funding and they acquire, they have all the liability, we have no liability.
Thank you.
I'm stuck on the vans. To me, that's a perfect example of a nonprofit request that's coming directly to us that feels like it could be, pressure, right? Put pressure on us to make that expenditure, and it doesn't feel like it's gone through the right process to me. So I'm really not in favor of that. I don't think. At this point, it feels really risky to me to start making expenditures like that here at the end. I feel real uncomfortable with it. I believe we gave the Boys and Girls Club a big chunk of funding, didn't we?
$500,000 earlier this year.
Yeah, and I'd really like to see,
Services.
need to see their whole budget, and could there fundraise for that? I don't know. There's lots of nonprofits that could come to us with requests like this right this red hot second, and we want to say yes, but it just doesn't feel like it's part of our normal process to do so.
I hear what you're saying, Heidi. This is about our children. Again, we take care of our kids, and the Boys and Girls Club is about our children. And when you see the buses, the vans that they're riding on in the metal, and we do things for other organizations that don't have anything to do with children. So this is about our kids, and that's not a whole lot of money. I mean, it's nothing compared to all the other things that we do.
I don't think
so. We're talking about 2 vans that will be responsible for transferring our children from DPS to the Boys and Girls Club. So, yeah. Well, a lot of other organizations can get money a different way as well. But again, this is something that we can fund, and it's not a whole lot of money to take care of our kids. So,
and I don't think, maybe if I'm putting words in your mouth, I don't think Commissioner Carter's against it, or like any of us are against it. It's just, the precedent that it also sets, because I know me and Keith, we talked about even the LGBTQ Center of Durham. They were reached out for requester funding, and that would have gone to support LGBTQ youth, especially the youth.
And we gave money to the LGBTQ Center. Yeah, we did.
But this was through a process, and they came with a separate request, and instead of bringing it to the board in the budget, I passed it off to staff to go through the nonprofit process, even though that's something I know all of us would support, but I think that is kind of like what hopefully we can do.
This was handled the same way. I mean, and all of you got copies of it? The manager, you've had it for how many months? You know, are we going to debate about $80,000 when are we gonna do
It's not a debate of the 80,000, it's a debate of process.
Okay, so we're going to deny taking care of our children because you say the process wasn't done to your specification. And that's
Not
and
to
it's
my
not true
specification, to the
because
county's specifications.
it was sent to management. It was sent to every board member. You've had it for how many months? It wasn't sent, it was, you got it, the date that you got it in your email, every one of you. And, okay, you know what? I'm not going to argue with you about the fact that this is a request from the Boys and Girls Club. We have funded the Boys and Girls Club to take care of the kids, to provide resources and material so that they continue to work with DPS and the children and our kids. Now, if you don't want to support it, then just say you don't want to support it and be done with it. Commissioner Jacobs.
I just have a question for the manager. Is there the opportunity to work with the city on looking at our surplus vehicles and seeing whether we have any vans or something that we could work on, you know, making them aware of some opportunities that I don't know, has there been any conversation with the city on this request and about surplus vehicles or anything like that?
There has not been that conversation because the proposal came requesting that the county help support the purchase of the 2 vans. So no, we didn't reach out about surplus.
Okay. And has our staff looked at any options like that or made a recommendation?
We have not because it came through, the proposal came to you all. And so because it came as a funding request, we put it on the add delete list as a funding request because the chair asked that it be something that we consider supporting in this budget. So we did not look at any other avenues of.
Is it possible for us to add that to the joint city-county meeting on the 13th? I don't know, to look at how something that could be done jointly or looking at surplus vehicles or some other, I don't know. I'm trying to think about some other process.
We can certainly add it to the agenda if that's something you all ask us to do. We certainly can.
There are other possibilities. I don't know that we know what they are now. The possibility in front of us is either or, yes or no to $80,000. If it's no and you want other possibilities, we can say no and then move forward. Or we can't answer that right now, to Dr. Sewell's point.
I guess I would like to know what our process is for funding requests from nonprofits.
So we normally work through the departments. The subject matter experts are the ones that would get those requests and would, review and work with the requesting organization. Because there is no department that works with the Boys and Girls Club. This just came through. Well, but the other requests we've gotten did not come through a department. The other Boys and Girls Club request didn't come through a department. So I don't know that we've ever connected them to a department. And so much like we've done with each of you, we said, if you have a request to put on the add delete list, let us know what that is. And this was a request that came from the chair to be added to the add delete list. And so that's why it's there.
Yeah, I will say, to Heidi's point, we have been, since I've been a county commissioner, we've been trying to get us out of the I know we've been trying to get staff to vet things and kind of run all the contracts. That's true.
I will say that the four-letter word ARPA has caused a different level of energy for ask, and it's something that the city is also trying to put their arms around, and we'll all have to revisit how do we manage needs. The Boys and Girls Club, they provide a tremendous service to the community and how they support DPS and other schools. There are many other partners that we're funding right now through ARPA funding. And so we'll just try to figure out the path forward. Well, no, I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just saying it's one that we just need to think about as the managers shared. It is one we can follow direction and have the conversation with the city. When we did share, and the chair in her remarks elevated how the Durham location, specifically that particular one, is touted across the nation as one of the highest performing with their students, and transportation is a gap for many low-wealth families. And so the ask isn't unreasonable. The process is where the board has the challenge, as with other asks that came through. So we will follow up, as the manager stated.
And I'll say this, and then I'll let it alone. I was at their breakfast, fundraising breakfast recently, and some of your past mayors and prominent people in the community was there, and they were writing checks and supporting the organization. So they are doing their due diligence to raise money. It's like any other organization, it just takes a lot to ensure that we are doing everything we can to provide for the children that they take care of from DPS. And like you said, they provide a really great service to our community. And, you know, for me, I'm willing to do whatever I can to support them.
Do you know if there have been any conversations with Durham Public Schools about them helping to provide transport kids from the schools there, or anything about that?
They do support that. The vans that they're using, if you looked at the information that you were sent, the vans are so old and worn, they have wire. You can see wire on the seatings. So if we want to use old, when you think about secondhand used vans, you know what I think about when we talk about that? It makes me think about when Black folks couldn't read and they had to get old used books. They couldn't get the new books. So we're talking to do that same thing in today to our children. It's like what we were talking about today, earlier today, that caste systems still exist. So why would we do that to our children for $80,000? No money. Well, what the manager said a few minutes ago, there hasn't been a portal for the way we have funded the Boys and Girls Club. We did it before. And what department? Is there a department for it?
Do I need to ask for a vote between the four of you? In or out?
So is it a possibility that this can go through the aqua funding? Is that something you can consider? I'll let you and the manager talk about it. All right,
Go far.
I'll let y'all talk.
I mean, I would just say, I'll vote for this because it's important to Brenda, you know, and because I do think the Boys and Girls Club does good work. I mean, I think a gazillion nonprofits do good work with children, and I'm sure they have funding needs as well that $80,000 would help with. We just haven't heard their request. But I do hear, you know, a plea from a commissioner that I care about, and I will vote yes for that reason, even though I don't think this is the right process to follow. And I worry, you know, that let's just say we're not going to get caught here next year. I don't know. It feels, and now I actually feel like I'm caving. But you know, I hear what you say, Brendan. I don't want to vote against something that seems really important to you, but that is politicizing it, right? That's a political decision I would be making rather than a decision that seems based on sound logic and process. I don't know what to say. Yeah.
And since the board has raised the process as an area of concern, what we can do is next year make sure that when we put out this all call for commissioners to say, what is it you want in the budget, to look at the source of where that request is coming from. And if it is a nonprofit, then we'll have a conversation.
And I don't think
about, right.
I don't think it should be something for just next year. I think it's something we should look into now because we're going to get requests even in the off-budget time. Like I mentioned, you know, I've received that request from the LGBTQ Center. I'm tempted now if it's going to make the rest of you cave and if I just bring it forward. Add it on the list.
Right.
But it's, yeah.
Yep. Right. Right.
It's like if we can figure out where nonprofits go before it comes to our board for discussion, find a housing for it in a department,
and
so
we
staff
can
can
do that.
discuss it.
We can do that. This came about because, again, we sent something out to say, commissioners, send us what it is you want added in the budget without thinking about some of this could be from nonprofits. So we'll put a framework together for how to.
Commissioner Jacobs asked me off to the side at one point. She was curious about the nonprofits we support in the county, period. There are many nonprofits we support in service to what we do. Meals and Wheels and DSS are a very close relationship that's not necessarily separate like it might be for Kate Elander as a subject matter expert. We can give you a list of those. We have staff that help develop the policy that you all are trying to stay within the process, and we will try to get from those subject matter experts some clear guidelines on the nonprofits they have chosen to work with and why. And then y'all can assess that, and we will give that, and to Dr. Sewell's point, remind you of that before the budget process cranks up in earnest so you all can make choices when you inevitably feel the request coming to you directly. Either stick with the process or not, or get agreement. This is a choice you made, and it's a hard one to stick by for any number of reasons.
Yeah, I just want to know, I mean, every other item on the add delete list has come through the staff. In some way. It's been vetted or from a staff committee or a department. And typically that is what our add delete list is. And when I first became a county commissioner, there were like 100 nonprofits that we funded, and it was very political because it was whoever, you know, people's favorite organizations. And so we really have tried to get away from that and put it back into a process with our staff. And also we realized that it was very ineffective to fund, you know, give 10,000 to like 100 different groups, and we got more into let's fund a few of them, you know, and focus on the strategic areas and give them more money and over like a 2-year time period. So that kind of went out the window a little bit with COVID, and now we have the ARPA money, but to your point, for the county manager to see all of the work that, you know, you all have put into the budget, staff have put a lot of work into this. So thank you.
So, to review, $14,000 for the Safe Sleep campaign. I believe that's a 1 year. Shannon, am I correct? That's a 1 year. So you asked about one-time funding. Maybe it goes. The Boys and Girls Club vans, one-time funding. Lincoln Health Center pre-development process will be ARPA funding, but even if it wasn't ARPA, it's no dollars, new net county dollars, but it's a one-time process, that pre-development. The county board stipends would be ongoing at $100,000. The forensic community support team, I think, is a 2-year program, and then a different funding source may pick it up. The gun safety proposal is a request for a minimum 3 years of that at $118,000, maybe some growth each of those years. We scroll down, David, and he's typing. There we go. We are at $526,000, which is a pretty easy number to accomplish through fund balance. We'll just add that as a revenue source. The outstanding number we have out here is APS, animal control. That request was for $201,000, which is 23% growth. We can do something less. I'll remind you, I gave you 3 date options. Today be the nice way to figure it out from a dollar standpoint in Cleveland. You can have some discussions and get back to the manager and let the budget office know before the 12th, and we can adjust the budget ordinance, and you can implicitly approve it in the budget ordinance at whatever number you choose to add to that if you so choose. It is currently, let me remind you, at flat funding. There is no growth from the current year amount, which is $800 and some odd thousand. So that's not 5%, that's not 10%. 10% would be a plus $80,000-ish growth.
727,000 still a easy amount to pull from fund balance?
Easy. It is an amount. We can handle another 200,000 with fund balance. We can handle another 50,000.
Yeah.
Yes, we can handle the full request. We would just continue to recommend fund balance appropriated. My third option is you can wait and give them additional money when the contract comes up for approval, and we would do the same thing. We would appropriate fund balance at that point, but it gives everyone time to get questions answered, whatever that means and whatever questions are out there. Those are the 3 timing options. The amount is from zero additional dollars, 5%, 10%, whatever percent, up to $201,000 more, which is what they've asked for.
What's the average, again, increase across the county for operations?
Actually, we didn't increase for operations, but we increased.
In the budget.
Yeah, in the budget, yeah.
Well, you're asking for minus personnel cost increases. Are you talking about just the budget overall increase?
So can you give us a chance, because there were some other questions that we were asked to get answered and get back. So if we can get you, but we can analyze that and get that to you. That's
I do
a
feel
great
like we
question.
should, at the budget, when we approve the budget, we should have an increase in there. I don't know what it should be, but.
As part, you wouldn't have to talk about it, but if you will let us know beforehand, we will put it in the budget as if it was the man, and you will just approve the budget and it'll be there.
There was a request for 10%.
Yeah, we can.
Commissioner Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do it a minimum of 10%. I mean, I hear.
I want to do the whole thing. I honestly wonder about this. If we put out an RFP and they're the only provider, they could come back and say, we want $3 million. That's what it's going to cost us to do it with, because they're their sole source provider, and we're going to have to do it.
I'm fine. I'm fine with actually right now saying that I support their budget.
Me too.
And I mean, for me, they gave us a lot of information. I'm fine, but I'm just one member. I just heard Heidi say she was, and I'm fine with it. So.
I hear 2. I see a 3, thumbs up 3 plus 201.
Keith, we're going to get the information back to the commissioners.
Would you please?
Asking us to hold it.
And
You got it. You got it.
Because there are a couple.
I hear my boss.
Right,
Is-
it's almost half.
Yeah.
Who have some outstanding questions.
Yeah,
Three of
but
us
you-
feel
would
like
you-
we're ready, but let's.
Yeah, if they could get the staff to get the information back to us, we'll do that. All right, what else you got, Keith?
That's it. That is not it. We're talking about, David he scrolled down to some other district funds, special tax district funds that are having some changes. The Bahama District is appropriating some fund balance for a new air system. This is their request using their fund balance that they have available to them. The county holds the fund balance, but it's their money from taxes collected and not spent or over-collected revenue. $489,000. The RTP is asking for several tax rate increases, a 1 cent general tax rate increase to get them to 8.8 cents on that, for things in preparation for growth in that community. This is not the transportation portion of the tax. Remember, they requested two, 1 cent for general growth, $226,000. They talked about obliquely and things like the public safety, like the sheriff substation there. Remember, we talked about the sheriff substation would still be bought and paid for by us, but they might help support some of that through this potential increase. And they wanted to get that increase in early so they could start accumulating some of those dollars to help with something related to that in the future, to which we haven't, as a board, a management and the board, hasn't made any decisions about what size or whatever scope it might be related to some sheriff substation, as an example. The second request they had was for another 2.5 cents, an additional 2.5 cents, for transportation-related issues. Again, the same thing in preparation for transportation coming. Future transportation needs, maximizing whatever Go Transit might do and all of that stuff. So RTP is asking for a 3.5 cent tax rate increase. And those two are shown below. Those are all the things that are happening. Net county increase, depending on some questions we give you, related will be $526,000 plus whatever we do for APS. And we recommend, the budget office recommends, and hopefully management will support this, an increase in general fund balance to support that, at least for the upcoming year. If some of those things, a few of those things are ongoing, will be built into the budget for 24, 25, and we'll use other revenue sources that year to pay for it. And we are at the end. You have crossed the line, as underwhelming as that may feel.
You were expecting,
I mean, I wanted a little bit more, but.
Okay. All right. We have a question, Mr. Jacobs.
I do. Related to the museum, I know, so we're going to talk about this on the 13th. I just want to make it known that I do support at least the city and the counties funding their $108,000 request, which would be $54,000 for each of us. Would that be something that would be discussed at the 13th?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can let Leo know, Leonardo, Councilmember Williams, since he's the liaison on the city side, to start to also talk to his colleagues that aren't on the joint city-county.
Well, I'm just one board member, so maybe could we get a...
I'm also supportive of that.
It's not in this budget.
Yeah.
Right. It would come separately. Yeah. It would come to you all separately.
Yeah, I would be supportive of it as long as the city supports it. As long as they can do half. I have not heard from any city council person that they would, so maybe the conversation on the 13th, but so we will already have approved our budget by then.
Right, we will have approved our budget.
Do amendment?
And we would bring it back to the board as a separate item for you all to approve.
Yeah. All right.
Is staff going to be sure that none of us break the law and vote on this budget, even though there's a nonprofit buried in there somewhere that we don't know?
Yes, now that Al has put
Al's
the
gonna
fear
make
of God.
sure that-
Like, for instance, I'm on the Durham Arts Council budget,
Yes, ma'am.
nonprofit. So if there's, and I don't know, is there anything in this budget for
Nothing
them?
in the budget for Arts Council.
Is there? I mean, I wouldn't know because
There
it's
is-
too small of a line item.
Our staff has been tasked with, thank you,
Yeah.
wonderful staff, with trying to identify, I think we have 7 or 8 that you all have self-identified at this point, to try and find all of those agencies and where they may be funded explicitly, meaning not someone just contracts with something for someone, but explicitly we're giving Downtown Durham Inc. or Durham Arts Council. So if you know, and I guess this is a favor, if I may have asked of the board, if you know of funding for any of those, please reach out to Keith and I and our budget team so we can also make sure. But we are checking with departments. We're scouring text entries in the budget to make sure we identify all of those potential conflicts, if you will.
And one other step that we did and we'll do is we run a list of all of the nonprofits. We have the procurement area to run a list of all of the nonprofits that we did business with since last year. We gave that to you, and that was like a final check. And so that's in process now. And so we'll send that out as one additional step because we do have more nonprofit partners with the ARPA process. We did our crosswalking with that also.
So if any of those boards are in the budget, such as, what? I'm trying to think of any of them that might be in the budget. How do we vote on the budget without extracting those out?
Okay, so first of all, I can tell how you're thinking. Most of yours are government boards.
Yeah, most of mine
They don't count.
I don't get no money.
Right.
They don't give me no money.
Right.
And I don't, yeah.
So sometimes y'all add little comments in that confuse your others. So I'm going to pull those out.
Okay.
Your getting paid is not a factor.
Okay.
Your being a voting or non-voting member is not a factor. Your being a liaison is not a factor. It is whether you are an officer or a board member, period.
Oh.
And so we're going to resend and re-talk about these emails that we've sent. Okay, so your intent and what is in your heart is not what's key. It's not about your heart. It's not about your intent. It's about your status. Consider it to be like strict liability. Like when they taught me when I first turned 18. We'll talk about that later. So this is about your status, not your intent.
Okay.
So if the board is a 501c3, for instance, it qualifies potentially as one for which there needs to be a recusal, versus if it's a different category. We'll help you with that. But the executive director, if you even have an executive director, is likely to be private or 501c3, for instance. But for those types of boards, there are restrictions, not government-created, partnership-created, all those kinds of things. And we're going to reemphasize to help you the form that you get, which you identify all your boards regardless, then we filter it and we decide which qualify, and then we look at whether we are funding them by line items. If we're doing line item funding, which is something you vote on, then we extract it out for you. We just have to have communications about that. And because I've now, in the last little bit, heard about the different ways you look at your service, plus one of the things that you say to others who are members sometimes, I know maybe not you, or let's call it your predecessor, is you are on that board to advocate for them. You're on that board to make sure they are properly funded. You're on that board to make sure they're helped in the way they need to be helped. That's stuff with maybe your predecessors. None of you would do that, I know. But maybe your predecessors once told that to others, that that's the purpose that you're there. If you ever get an inclination to say that to a fellow board member in the future, that that is why you're there, you're also going to say, but you can't advocate for their funding publicly. And that'll clarify it. Yes, you can privately if you do not do it in this room. You're not supposed to do it.
He said you're not supposed to do it, period.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't understand. I can understand not being able to vote on it, but I don't understand not being able to advocate, because if you are the most educated person because you are a member of that.
You're having a trouble with logic.
Yeah.
And I was telling you where this came from.
In actuality, how this will all play out on the 12th is you will do a budget ordinance approval of all the things except what is defined by legal and you all. That will be taken out of the budget ordinance. You will approve the budget ordinance, all of you. Then we will have the very first budget amendments to that budget ordinance after you pass the ordinance. The first five amendments last year were exactly these things. The Museum of Life and Science will come up as a budget amendment to fund them at an amount minus whoever is recused from that vote. And then we will have a second amendment that may be whatever the next group is. Hopefully, it won't be more than 5. It may be. We have a new attorney, and it depends on what the definition is. We'll have however many amendments, and you all individuals will drop on and off of each one of those amendments. But it'll all be done on the 12th, and we'll be done with it.
Right.
Back to
I know.
legislative.
But we
body.
did that last year, though. Right.
Correct. That's the first year we did it, was last year.
Yeah.
And it was 5 different votes that were taken after the budget ordinance.
Okay, there's a conversation here that says nonprofit board rules wrap up. What is that?
Is that's what we just did?
That's what we just did?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Third time. Anything else? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.